Chapter 170. Just as he was thinking, he saw the girl's gaze sweep over him, and she slightly froze. Xiao Lizi suddenly became nervous. He only knew that he had never seen the young lady of the Shen family before. Could it be that this was what the old people in the palace referred to as fate at first sight? Then wouldn't the young miss of the Shen family value him? Just as he was feeling terrified and excited in his heart, he saw that Shen Miao's gaze had instantly turned away, as if it was just an accident. Xiao Lizi's heart was somewhat disappointed in a split second. He did not know why, but he felt that after climbing up this Shen family's young lady, there would be a big fortune waiting for him. But now, he seemed to have missed that great opportunity. Before waiting for Xiao Lizi to figure out where this inexplicable idea came from, a tall foreign sitting at the front of the hall had already smiled and said, "Shen foreign, you really made people wait for a long time." Luo Shui Yin furrowed her brows slightly, and then a bright smile blossomed on her face. There were some delays on the road. Fifth young lady is really getting prettier by the day. That tall foreign's eyes landed on Shen Miao again and said with half-truth and half-falsehood, "Indeed, a person who is going to be engaged." Thinking back to the beginning, she was still a little girl. Hearing this, Luo Shui Yan's smile immediately sank. The matter of Shen Miao's engagement was simply inexplicable to Luo Shui Yan. It was the Shen residence's people who did it behind her and Shen Xian's back, but she did not admit it at all and was not afraid of offending the Wei family. In terms of family background, the Wei family was not bad, but it could not be compared to Shen Xian. At most, she would offend the Wei family, and what was more important than Shen Miao's happiness? Moreover, at this moment, Wei foreign was not present. Wanting to clarify these matters for Shen Miao, Luo Shui Yin opened her mouth. "What are you saying? Our Jiao Jiao has just reached a marriageable age, and there is no need to marry so early. I want to keep Jiao Jiao by my side for a few more days." When these words came out, all the Furins and young ladies were stunned. After all, the news of Shen Miao's engagement had spread like wildfire a few days ago. Afterwards, at old Shen Foreign's birthday banquet, the rest of the Shen family almost tacitly agreed, but now when it came to Luo Shui Yin, it seemed that the marriage was going to be empty. The tall lady squinted her eyes, as if she sensed that something was amiss. Her smile became more and more meaningful as she said, "Oh, so Shen Foreign still wanted to keep Fifth Shenyang Miss for a few more days? But a few days ago, wasn't it said that Fifth Shenyang lady was going to be engaged?" Foreign really knows how to joke. Luo Shui Yin was not afraid of any face, and was even more not afraid that the internal conflicts of the Shen family would be exposed in front of everyone. With relatives like the rest of the Shen family, what was the point of protecting their face? She raised her eyebrows and said loudly, "How can there be a daughter's engagement without her parents knowing anything? Master, and I don't know what Madam is talking about. So where did the engagement come from?" As soon as Luo Shui Yin finished speaking, whispers sounded in the surroundings. The tall lady didn't expect Luo Shui Yin to say that, so she was stunned for a moment. Correct, there was nothing in this world that the parents of a daughter did not know about. For Luo Shui Yin and Shen Xian to not know about Shen Miao's engagement, there was only one reason: the Shen family hid it from them. As for why the Shen family wanted to do this, there were a lot of reasons. Just as everyone was pondering, Ren Wan Yun, Chen Roqiu, and the rest also arrived. Shen Gui and Shen Wan naturally went to the men's main hall first. Ren Wan Yun brought Shen Qing, Chen Roqiu, and Shen Yu over slowly. This was the first time Shen Qing went out after she was bedridden, and these days she had lost a lot of weight. She was originally at the best age of a young female, but now there was a faint old fatigue. In order to cover up her haggardness, she put on a thick layer of rouge and powder, and wore a red dress. Shen Qing was not suitable for such gorgeous colors, and with one look, it was very unsuitable and somewhat incongruous. In addition, there was a child in her abdomen, so even though she tried her best to cover it up, her steps looked somewhat unsteady. Chapter 171. As for Shen Yu, she was as usual wearing a pink long embroidered dress with a light twist and a thin layer of makeup. She looked like a weak and scholarly little beauty. If it was in the past, she would be able to attract everyone's attention, but today it was not the case. With Shun Miao's example, Xinyu's steps seemed to be a little jerky, her movements were a little stiff, and her expression was a little nervous. Even her hands were clasped together with too much strength. In short, she could not be compared to Shin Miao at all. Thinking about this, everyone's expression became somewhat strange. When did Xinyu, who was in the limelight in the Shin family, was actually left far behind by Shin Miao? Xinyu was young and did not know, but Shin Roqiu was sensitive enough to detect the difference in those Furin's eyes. If it was in the past, the gaze that landed on her mother and daughter would be filled with jealousy and admiration, but today it seemed to be more picky. Chun Roqiu's brows jumped. This etiquette and figure had always been the part that she was most proud of, and she was also very strict with Xinyu. She was confident that no noble female in the Ding capital could do better than her daughter, but looking at these people's expressions, who else could do better? Naturally, she did not know that the person who did better than Xinyu was right in front of her. Shin Miao sat beside Luo Shuiyin. Even though Luo Shuiyin was considered as the main character of this returning banquet, it seemed that she was isolated. It was indeed so. The noble families in the capital had always had their own circle. It was still all right for the males as they spoke with their scholarly titles and intertwined in their careers. Even if one did not like it in their heart, they would still have to go over it on the surface. Females were different. Most of the noble females in the capital were proud and arrogant. For example, the D daughters were not willing to play with the Shu daughters, and the people who were born and raised in the Ding capital looked down on outsiders. Luo Shuiyin was that outsider. It was alright if she came from a rich and fertile land in Jiangnan, but unfortunately Luo Shuiyin came from the bitter cold northwest region, and when she just married to the Ding capital, Luo Shuiyin did not even know how to speak, and that accent was secretly ridiculed by these Furins for a long time. They ridiculed that the northwest desert was extremely windy and sandy, and the female skin was extremely delicate. There were bandits everywhere, and one feared that one would be robbed on the road. As for resources, it was even more scarce, and it was hard to see good silk and satin throughout the year. Of course, there were elements of exaggeration in this, but the targeting of Luo Shuiyin was real. Moreover, Luo Shuiyin was the first one in the Ding capital to go to the battlefield by herself. When faced with something that they could not do, if it was rare, people would often reject it. This was not only the case for women, but also for men. Thus, Luo Shuiyin was ostracized by the circle of noble females in the Ding capital. In addition, Shin Miao was previously an out-and-out idiot, so this mother and daughter pair were the targets of these Furins' secret ridicule. Bai Wei's mother, Madame Bai, asked Chen Ruoqiu to sit next to her. She and Chen Ruoqiu were close friends, so naturally, she had to sit with Chen Ruoqiu. Bai Wei pulled Xinyu to her side. Ren Wanyin walked over to Yi Furin and sat down. Yi Peilan looked at Xin Qing and complained, "You have not appeared for a long time. I heard that you are ill. You look thinner, but why is your face a little swollen?" Xin Qing lowered her head in panic and said vaguely, "Perhaps I've been lying in bed for too long." Ren Wanyin had decocted a lot of medicine for her to soothe the miscarriage. Even though Xin Qing hated the child in her tummy, she was even more afraid that she would not be able to be a mother after the miscarriage. Thus she could only clench her teeth and drink it. Since it was to nourish the fetus, one could not do without all kinds of supplements, so naturally one would be fatter. Even though the figure was not visible, it was already somewhat swollen. Yi Peilan did not suspect anything and only patted Xin Qing's hands. "You must take care of your body. You are already one who is going to be engaged. One must not spoil your body." Chapter 172. Xin Qing's body trembled, and she lowered her head and did not speak. She knew that Ren Wanyin had told her about the Huang family's marriage, and that Huang Dixing was considered a young talent, but she did not know why her heart was very resistant to this marriage. It was as if her intuition told her that under this bright and beautiful marriage, there was an unknown danger. Yi Peilan's voice was not soft and was heard by Huang Furin, who was sitting at the side. When Huang Furin heard it, she looked at Xin Qing critically. Regarding this marriage, she merely wanted to find a nominal wife for her son. Xin Qing could be considered as a good match for her son, but looking at her sickly appearance today, it would be better if she wasn't a sickly invalid. After all, She still had to carry on the Huang family's ancestral line and give birth to a son. As for the rest, she could do whatever she wanted. At the other end, Bai Foreign was quietly whispering to Chen Rochio, "Rochio, I see that the fifth young lady in your residence is not simple." "Oh?" Chen Rochio asked curiously. "Why do you say so?" "One fear that there is someone guiding fifth Shin young lady from behind. Just now when she came in, all the Furins had seen it. That posture and etiquette was even more proper than in the palace. If I say something that one does not like to hear, one fear that you wear is much inferior." Chen Rochio was startled. "What are you saying? Who does not know that fifth lady does not understand etiquette?" Bai Wei was Chen Rochio's best friend and also came from a scholarly family. Thus, naturally, the requirements for etiquette were very high. Today, she looked up to Xin Miao so highly, which made Chen Rochio feel that it was inconceivable. At the same time that she felt that it was ridiculous, she could not help but look towards the place where Luo Shui Yin was sitting. Luo Shui Yin was isolated as she sat at one side, and Xin Miao was next to her. Luo Shui Yin was after all old and had a lot of experience, so even if no one paid attention to her, she would not have the slightest change in expression. She only needed to bring out the same imposing manner that she had on the battlefield that would not change color even if MT Tai collapsed in front of her. But Xin Miao, a young female, also sat upright. If others did not speak to her, it did not look like they were deliberately ignoring her, but more like they did not dare to speak to her. Chen Rochio's fingertips were somewhat trembling. The womenfolk all had their own thoughts, and in the main hall, Shen Xian's words had also set off a huge wave in the hall. "Official Shen's words are true?" Emperor Wenhui asked. Emperor Wenhui was close to 60 years of age, but did not look old at all. There was a smile on his face, and his pair of eyes were astute and sharp, and one could faintly see the sharpness of his youth. At this moment, he looked down at Shen Xian and asked in a low voice. Just now, in front of all the officials, Emperor Wenhui rewarded Shen Xian, but Shen Xian requested for Emperor Wenhui to bestow a grace to allow him to stay in the Ding capital for half a year, as he wanted to accompany his wife and daughter in the residence. For so many years, the formidable great General Shen Xian had fought on the battlefield and was brave and invincible, but he had never made such a request. For a moment, it made people think deeply, and the expressions of the officials changed. At this critical moment, Shen Xian wanted to stay in the capital for half a year. Was it really just to accompany his loved ones? Emperor Wenhui sized up Shen Xian. He had not died yet, but the fight for the throne between the princes was already like a storm. Now the situation was ever-changing, and any party's intervention would cause the entire situation to change. A few days ago, the matter of Shen Xian's daughter, Shen Miao, being infatuated with Prince Ding had spread like wildfire. Emperor Wenhui even thought about what would happen if this fat piece of meat of the Shen family landed in Fu Xiuyi's hands, but who knew that there was suddenly no news of it? Now, that Shen Xian suddenly made such a request. Could it be that there was another plan? He carefully sized up the man below. Shen Xian's skin was dark, and his eyes were firm. His figure was as straight as a hill, and when he looked at Emperor Wenhui, his actions were also respectful. He was a loyal and brave Iron Man. But when an emperor controls his subjects, it was never based on the surface but the value. To Emperor Wenhui, if there was a threat to the country, even if it was a huge merit, it must be removed cleanly. Chapter 173. After a moment, Emperor Wenhui laughed out loud. For so many years, official Shun has been guarding the northwestern region, and now that the enemy has been defeated, Zhen is deeply gratified. It is Ming Qi's blessing to have such a general. Official Shun's request, Zhen will approve. Shen Xian immediately thanked, "Thanking your majesty." This action made the other people in the hall to look at him. After Emperor Wenhui approved, he walked out of the main hall, leaving a group of people behind. Shen Xian's action just now was unexpected, and the first to speak was actually the Marquis of Lin and Xieding. This person, who had been dealing with the Shen family for a lifetime, obviously did not understand Shen Xian's actions and ridiculed. Could it be that General Shun is afraid of the war and stay in the Ding capital for half a year to enjoy? When Shen Xian heard it, He was not angry and even smiled, revealing his white teeth. Is Marquis Xie envious of this general? AI. It is no wonder. After all, Marquis Xie does not have a wife and daughter. You. Xie Ding's face was livid. Shen Xian, this fellow looked like a big and rough person without any schemes, but in fact his mouth was the most poisonous. Princess Yu Qing's death and Xie Jingxing treating him like a stranger was Xie Ding's Achilles heel, and Shen Xian mercilessly stabbed him with a knife. Xie Ding really wished that he could use a spear to stab Shen Xian to death. Fu Xiao looked at Shen Xian, and his expression was rather interesting. The Shen family had exceeded his expectations time and time again. In the past, Shen Miao admired him, and even though he was annoyed, he thought that he could make use of the Shen family. Afterwards, Shen Miao actually clarified that she had no such intentions towards him and caused Fu Xiao to be ridiculed by Prince Zhou and Prince Jing. Now that Shen Xian proposed to stay in the capital for half a year, it made people even more puzzled. Fu Xiao, he had an inexplicable feeling that the Shen family that seemed to be the easiest to grasp suddenly became an unstable rock. It seemed that in the future, there would be numerous variables that would affect the overall situation. Shen Xian's unconventional moves made the officials somewhat inexplicable, but the rewards that he obtained today made everyone jealous. The rest of the people went up one after another and sincerely or falsely congratulated him. Shen Xian talked to them about the interesting matters in the northwest region, but did not notice that there was a gloomy gaze behind him. That gaze stared fixedly at Shen Xian, as if it was a man-eating poisonous snake entrenched in the grass, waiting for the opportunity to rush up and bite him to death. And that person who was looking at Shen Xian, the corner of his robe was empty and was playing with a thumb ring in his hand. It was not someone else, but Prince Yu. The atmosphere here was rather lively, and Shen Xiao had also blocked Wei Qian in the corridor outside. Wei Qian was also considered talented and humble, but compared to the healthy and energetic Shen Xiao, he seemed too weak and frail. He looked at Shen Xiao and asked with a frown, "Little Deputy General Shen, why are you stopping me?" Shen Xiao sized up Wei Qian from head to toe. He himself had a cheerful and friendly temperament, and if he met Wei Qian in the past, perhaps he would make friends, but after hearing Shen Miao say that Wei Qian already had a sweetheart in his heart, looking at this person again made him angry. From Shen Xiao's point of view, his younger sister was very good, but she did not like others. How could she tolerate being despised? "You are Wei Qian?" Thinking of this, Shen Xiao's tone was not very happy. Wei Qian was startled for a moment, and sensed that the person who came was not kind. "Exactly. I am here for nothing." Shen Xiao patted Wei Qian's shoulder and said, "Just to inform you that previously there was a rumor that my younger sister was engaged to your Wei family. Since it is a rumor, my Shen family did not take it to heart, so your Wei family need not take it to heart." Shen Xiao took a step back and acted as if nothing had happened, but said in an eerie tone, "My younger sister is picking a husband, so naturally she must first ask my eyes." Finishing, he did not even look at Wei Qian's face as he turned and strode away. Wei Qian was stunned at the same spot. Shen Xiao's words clearly wanted to draw a line with his Wei family, but it was true that he had a sweetheart. Even if Shen Xiao felt injustice for his younger sister, there was no need to say that he was a good-for-nothing fool. The Shen family's protection was too fierce. Moreover, there was no chance for him to intervene in this marriage. Outside the corridor, Gao Yang was overjoyed as he looked at Wei Qian, who was standing there in a daze. He shook his head and said, "This Shen family is just too overbearing. To be so arrogant and not even put the Wei family in their eyes. I've seen enough?" The purple-clad youth beside him had a hint of impatience in his eyes, and his tone was not pleasant. "Is there an end to it?" "Wei Qian is your person," Gao Yang said. "He is being bullied like this, and you are not going to stand up for him. If you like, you go." Xie Jingxing glanced at him. "I do not dare," Gao Yang said as if he was watching a good show. "That Shen family girl has so many people protecting her. If one is not careful, trouble will come knocking." "But..." His smile was gentle, but his tone was somewhat gloating. "Today Prince Yu is present, so one feared that the matter would not be good. I heard that Prince Yu plans to marry a Wang Fei. Guess which Shen family's young lady he wants to marry? I guess that he cannot marry." Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows, and his eyes fell to the front. In the garden, a familiar figure trotted forward and said something to the little eunuch at the other side before stuffing a sachet into the little eunuch's hands. That figure was Shun Miao's personal maid, Jingzhe. Chapter 174. He is unable to marry. Gao Yang followed Xie Jingxing's gaze and saw that in the flowering shrubs, Shun Miao's personal maid was instructing the little eunuch something, and the little eunuch complied. Most likely it was his first time receiving so much money as he was overjoyed and respectfully said something to the maid before leaving. After the little eunuch left, Jingzhe stood at the same spot, and there was a trace of suspicion on her face. Shun Miao specifically instructed her to hand the things over to this little eunuch, but this little eunuch was obviously a newcomer to the palace and did not have any interaction with Shun Miao. So why was there a special instruction? Unable to think of the reason, Jingzhe shook her head. In any case, the purpose had been achieved, so she turned and left. This young lady of the Shun family is very courageous, Gao Yang evaluated. To even dare to play tricks in the palace, and it seems that Shin Xian was not aware of it. Xie Jingxing declined to comment. For a person who dared to burn her own ancestral hall, he never thought that the other party would be timid. As for what to do at what place, most likely in Shun Miao's eyes, there was no difference. Let's go. A strange smile floated on his lips. We should also go and watch the show. I will not go. Gao Yang blinked his eyes. Now it is better to be careful when doing things. Moreover, there is a change in the plan, so one must be more cautious. Up to you, Xie Jingxing said lazily, and suddenly thought of something and casually said, if there is time, go to those old fellows at the Imperial Medical Institution to inquire if there is anything. Yes, sir. Gao Yang cupped his hands in obeisance, then walked toward the other side at a steady pace. Time passed by unhurriedly, and it was almost time for the returning banquet to begin. The female sat at the bottom of the Great Hall, while the male sat at the top of the Great Hall. The one on the leftmost side near the center was the prince. Prince Zhou, Prince Jing, and Prince Ding had already arrived. Following behind were Prince Li, Prince Xiang, and Prince Cheng. Prince Zhou and Prince Jing were brothers, so naturally they were in the same group. Prince Xiang and Prince Cheng were led by Prince Li and formed their own faction. As for His Highness the Crown Prince who had yet to arrive, he had the support of Prince Xian and Prince Chu. As for the ninth prince, His Highness Prince Ding, Fu Xiu Yi, he did not belong to any faction and looked to be the weakest and most neutral faction. With the appearance of the three kings, the clamor in the hall gradually quietened down. Emperor Wenhui was also strange. He had 9 sons, and each of them were extremely outstanding. If it was an ordinary family, they would have been overjoyed to have so many outstanding sons. But in a noble family, the more outstanding sons there were, the more intense the competition would be. What was even more unfortunate was that these 9 outstanding sons were born into the most ruthless imperial family in the world. This also meant that their excellence would become a nail in each other's eyes, and both of them wanted to get rid of it. Now that the 9 sons had grown up, even though the crown prince had been crowned, the various factions had yet to restrain themselves. When Emperor Wenhui was still around, he was still able to maintain the balance, but there would be a day when this entrenched dragon would grow old, and at that time, the imperial family of Mingqi that was already ready to move would be another reign of terror. And in Prince Zhou's faction, Prince Li's faction, and the Crown Prince's faction, the Crown Prince looked to have the highest strength on the surface, but the Crown Prince's body was weak, and Emperor Wenhui would not allow a weak son to sit on the dragon throne. So the Crown Prince's power was not so much that it was a follower of the orthodox lineage, but rather it was fake. If one's body was slightly unwell, it would only benefit Prince Xian and Prince Chu. In Prince Li's faction, because of the large number of people, there were many officials who secretly pledged their allegiance to him. Even though Prince Zhou and Prince Jing's legitimacy was not as good as the Crown Prince's and their power was not as good as Prince Li's, but they had the Emperor's doted mother, consort Su Xian, and the Su family had a strong support. Chapter 175. The remaining Prince Ding was not placed in anyone's eyes. In terms of power, it was a joke to fight alone, In terms of background, his birth mother consort Dong Shu was extremely low-key, and if she did not give birth to Fu Xiu, she would not be able to sit in the position of the four consorts. Even though Fu Xiu was outstanding and humble, there was a limit to one's strength, thus everyone was not optimistic about him. Even though Fu Xiu was neutral and was not interested in the fight for the throne, but in this deep palace, one must be wary of others. His few brothers were still eyeing him covetously. However, the female guests did not look at people as deeply as the males, but the young females present were secretly sizing up Fu Xiu's handsome appearance and whispered with slightly red faces. In all fairness, the Fu family all had good looks, and Fu Xiu was the most outstanding among the 9 princes. The imperial family bestowed him with an extraordinary bearing, and he always had an indifferent attitude, not putting on a high and mighty attitude, nor raising his chin up to the sky. To the young females, this kind of amiable and out-of-this-world male was really full of elegance. His Highness Prince Ding is indeed too handsome. A young female's whisper sounded beside her ears. Shen Miao turned her head and did not know when Feng and Ning was already by her side. She smiled at her and then said with a straight face, "Since you have arrived, why did you not come and look for me, and even put on the airs of an eldest young lady to make me look for you?" Shen Miao was somewhat inexplicable by her words. Towards Feng and Ning, this eldest young lady, sticking to her like a piece of sticky candy, Shen Miao was also somewhat helpless. She did not know when did Feng and Ning change her attitude towards her. Shen Miao was after all not a real budding young female, and was unable to be as intimate as peers with Feng and Ning. Moreover, now she was unable to accept the goodwill of others without any precaution, so she did not know how to treat Feng and Ning. Finally, she could only shake her head and find an excuse. "I did not see you." Shen Miao naturally did not know that if it was the previous her, Feng and Ning would not even take a glance at her. But the current Shen Miao was the Empress who had been bathed in a storm of blood in the inner palace of Mingqi. One would have a feeling of worship towards those who were stronger than themselves. Feng and Ning could faintly feel the strength in Shen Miao's heart and naturally would unconsciously follow. Feng and Ning's lips twitched and suddenly whispered teasingly, "But His Highness Prince Ding is also here. In any case, he is also your favorite person. Why do you not take a look?" As if to prove her words, when Feng and Ning's voice landed, Jiang Shao Xian laughed loudly. "Fifth Shen young lady, His Highness Prince Ding has arrived." She wanted to embarrass Shen Miao and knew that under the watchful eyes of the public, in front of the imperial family, Shen Miao would not dare to get angry, and even Luo Shui Yin would have to endure it. Feng of Shun of Shun of Shun. She Shun Shun, she of words, of Shun of the Shun. Shun too. Ding Shen Shun Shun, Shun Ding Shen Shun. She Ding Shun of King of Shun. Luo Shui Yin gritted her teeth. She knew that this person was deliberately provoking Shen Miao. Even though Shen Miao said that she was no longer in love with Prince Ding, but Luo Shui Yin knew that liking a person was not something that one could easily give up. Shen Miao looked as if nothing had happened on the surface, but one's heart was in extreme pain. Luo Shui Yin was annoyed that Shen Xian was not present at this time. She turned her head to look at Shen Miao, fearing that Shen Miao would be sad, and said softly, "Jiao Jiao," at the male side of the banquet. Everyone's eyes were also very interesting. Kai Lin's lips twitched, as if he was rejoicing in others' misfortune. In the academy examinations, Shen Miao caused him to lose face, and now Shen Miao herself was going to repeat his mistakes. Su Ming Feng and Su Ming Lang were sitting side by side. Su Ming Lang pulled Su Ming Feng's sleeves and said in surprise, "Eldest brother, has older sister Shen also arrived?" Chapter 176. His head was too small, and the table blocked his line of sight, making it even more impossible for him to see Shen Miao clearly. Su Ming Feng shook his head. He did not know why this younger brother of his had a good impression of the fifth young lady of the Shen family. If it was not because Su Ming Lang was too young, Su Ming Feng would have thought that this younger brother of his had other thoughts about Shen Miao. But he also turned his head to look at Shen Miao. With such a close distance encounter, how would Shen Miao face Prince Ding? At the corner of the male side of the banquet, there was a green-clad male. Compared to the other noble people who were dressed in brocade clothes, his dressing was extremely simple, but this did not make him cut a sorry figure. On the contrary, because of his simple dressing, there was a kind of romantic and unrestrained attitude of an ancient scholar. At this moment, he was quietly looking at the purple-clad young female who kept her head down, and there was a faint fluctuation in his eyes. This person was Pei Lang. Pei Lang was not qualified to participate in such an occasion, but today there was a death in the family of the supervisor of Guang Wentang. Thus the supervisor let Pei Lang represent Guang Wentang to participate. Even though Pei Lang was a teacher in Guang Wentang, he was considered as half a supervisor. Thus he did not decline. Who knew that when he arrived, he would see such a scene? Prince Zhou and Prince Jing stood beside Fu Xiuyi and heard Jiang Shaoxian's deliberately provocative words. Prince Zhou laughed and patted Fu Xiuyi's shoulder before saying meaningfully, "Our ninth younger brother is really amazing." Fu Xiuyi's brows slightly wrinkled, but there was a faint smile on his face. Fourth older brother must be joking. Even though he said so, his eyes unconsciously drifted towards the young female in the seat. Ah! A light laugh escaped from the young female's lips, and the surroundings suddenly quietened down. This laugh did not have any emotions. To say that it was ridiculing, it was too gentle. To say that it was cheerful, it was very calm. It was like a cup of strong wine that had been settled for a long time. 5 flavors were mixed together, and 1,000 complex flavors were in one's heart before it finally turned into a light laughter. The males were still all right, but the females were surprised. They had been immersed in the inner courtyard for so many years, but they could not hear the meaning in Shun Miao's laughter. How old was she? Shun Miao raised her head, and her eyes did not stop. It was like the arrow that was shot at Kai Lin at the academy examinations as it shot towards the figure who was standing with his hands behind his back, Fu Xiuyi. Fu Xiuyi was slightly startled. There was no infatuation, love, worship, or surprise in the girl's eyes. There was only a bottomless calm. He was like an old man who had reincarnated for 100 years, looking at him through the vicissitudes of time. There was no sorrow or joy in his eyes, but it made one feel uneasy. That pair of clear eyes had an extremely beautiful shape. If they were curved, it would be so sweet that it would remind people of the taste of honey. But she only watched quietly. In Fu Xiuyi's heart, there was a sudden surge of uneasiness. It was as if he was walking alone in the jungle, but in the depths of the grass, there was a huge beast that was staring at him. That feeling of uneasiness was getting stronger and stronger, and one did not know when the faint smile on his face had disappeared as he stared fixedly at Shun Miao. Heh! Shun Miao chuckled again, and this time everyone could see it clearly. Her rosy lips slightly curved, but the corners of her eyes did not move. It was clearly a sneer. It was probably a cold sneer formed from a faint resentment towards the person he loved, but couldn't get because his love had turned into hatred. Everyone thought like this, but were surprised that Shun Miao dared to express her dissatisfaction so straightforwardly. Who would have the guts to sneer at a prince in the palace? Fu Xiuyi did not move. In that sneer, he could clearly see a layer of faint murderous intention. Even though it was deliberately concealed, it was as if it could not be concealed at all. The kind of coldness that was determined to win actually caused his heart to shrink. Chapter 177. Just because he did not accept the other's intention, she had the intention to kill him? Fu Xiuyi was somewhat stunned. What made him even more surprised was that he actually felt that the intention to kill was full of threat. Could this be his illusion? When he looked at Shun Miao again, the latter had already turned her head and said something to Feng and Ning. There was a flash of killing intent in Shun Miao's eyes. After such a long time, even in the academy examinations, she only saw Fu Xiuyi from afar and did not want to meet Fu Xiuyi at such a close distance. It was because she was afraid that once she got close to Fu Xiuyi, she would not be able to hide her monstrous hatred. Jiang Shaoxian's provocative words were passed by Shun Miao's 2 inexplicable chuckles. Her first chuckle was complicated, and the second chuckle was slightly cold, but even a fool could see that there was no trace of affection towards Fu Xiuyi in it. After 2 chuckles, she simply spoke directly to the young lady beside her. That contempt and disregard made one unable to tell if it was intentional or unintentional. It was just that the atmosphere was made cold by her. There was a flash of light in Prince Zhou's eyes as he smiled and leaned close to Fu Xiao-yi, ninth younger brother. It seems that you are not that invincible. Fu Xiao-yi smiled bitterly, but his heart gradually paid more attention to Shen Miao. Hey, it seems that the fifth young lady of the Shun family has some spirit, Su Mingfeng said with interest, now that his serious illness was much better, but he was still unable to work hard. Thus his official position was not restored. Older Shen's sister is originally very good. Su Ming Lang rolled his eyes at him. Pei Lang, who was seated, lowered his head to take a sip of tea, but his eyes flashed with deep thoughts. Just as there was some silence, one heard a hearty laughter. Ha ha. Everyone, one has arrived late. That small mountain-like figure was not Shen Xian. The one following closely behind Shen Xian was Shen Xiao. Seeing that the important person had arrived, all the bureaucrats greeted him. Shen Xian greeted Prince Zhou and the rest before taking their seats. He and Shen Xiao also missed the good show just now. Else even if Shen Xian did not take action, Shen Xiao did not care if he would have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex and would definitely make Jiang Shaoxian unable to bear the consequences. After Shen Xian, the princely trio and the crown prince trio also arrived. The crown prince's body was weak, but the crown princess was born with a dignified air. Shen Miao looked at the crown princess, and her eyes were moved. This crown prince consort had the prime minister's family behind her, and it was the crown prince who used the power of the crown prince consort's family to stabilize his position. Afterwards, when the crown prince consort was pregnant, Emperor Wenhui was afraid that the crown prince's body would be seriously ill, and it would benefit the crown prince consort's family to monopolize power. So he used methods to make the crown prince consort miscarry. The crown princess was deeply in love with the crown prince, but she didn't know that her husband could kill his own flesh and blood. She was also afraid that if she told her paternal family, it would bring disaster to her paternal family. In the end, she died of depression. 3 years after the death of the crown prince consort, the residents of the prime minister came to know of the truth and wanted to take revenge for their daughter, but in the end they relied on Fu Xiao. Shen Miao looked at the cup in front of her. The members of the Fu family were all vicious and merciless, and the men of the Fu family were all unfaithful and fickle. She and the crown princess were no different. They were all sacrifices for power, innocent pawns abandoned. Now, she was going to be the chess player. Whoever wanted to play chess had to be prepared to sacrifice themselves. After the crown princess sat down, her friends from before she got married chatted and laughed with her. Over at the male side, Prince Yu also arrived. When Prince Yu arrived, the people at the female side of the banquet were somewhat silent, especially those young females who were so scared that their faces turned pale. In the previous returning banquets, Prince Yu would not participate. For so many years, he did not put the matters of the court in his eyes, and because of this, the suspicious emperor Wenhui was exceptionally tolerant to this younger brother. Of course, there was the credit of Prince Yu risking his life to protect him when he was young, but if it was not for Prince Yu being well-behaved for so many years and not interfering in the matters of the court, one feared that no matter how big the life-saving grace was, it would not be able to overcome Emperor Wenhui's suspicions. After all, Emperor Wenhui's brothers all died in his hands. Chapter 178. Prince Yu of the first rank, who had never participated in the returning banquet, suddenly appeared, which made the female guests uneasy and the male guests puzzled. But the few princes were smiling in their hearts. The woman who was on good terms with the crown princess said, "I wonder why His Highness the Crown Prince has appeared." Her words were filled with probing intent. The crown princess naturally knew the reason. She curled the corners of her lips and said with a smile, "Royal uncle has been single for so many years. It is time to find someone to take care of his life." As soon as these words came out, the womenfolk were all bewildered. Could it be that Prince Yu of the first rank wanted to choose a Wang Fei? But becoming Prince Yu's consort was not a good thing. At least at this moment, the young ladies could not help but shrink back a little. "May I ask the crown princess," the foreign asked with a smile, "which young miss has the good fortune?" But the crown princess was unwilling to say. She only shook her head and said with a smile, "You will know in a while." Because of the crown princess's words, the womenfolk sank into a stalemate. Everyone was slightly afraid. That Yu Wang Fei's title was like a talisman that hastened one's death. Sleeping with her would only result in a faster death. How could it be considered as a good thing? Feng and Ning leaned close to Xun Miao and asked, "Make a guess. Who exactly is that Yu Wang Fei?" Xun Miao said, "I cannot guess." "You are really boring." Feng and Ning curled her lips. On the other side, Qing was tightly grabbing onto the corner of her clothes. The moment she saw Prince Yu, her mind was filled with the myriad of tortures that Prince Yu used on her that night. If it was not for Ren Wanyun who was tightly pinching her, Qing would have screamed out loud. "Do not be afraid of Qing'er." Ren Wanyun moved closer to Qing's ear and spoke to her in a voice that only the two of them could hear. "Today, Prince Yu is here to help you tidy up that woman. When she enters Prince Yu residence, naturally there will be means to make her beg for death." At the side, Chen Roqiu looked at Ren Wanyun and Qing's movements and drank a mouthful of tea before smiling gently. After Prince Yu, one thought that other than the Emperor and Empress, everyone had almost arrived, but suddenly there were bursts of exclamations. Feng and Ning was talking to Xun Miao when she heard the commotion and looked up. In the depths of the palace, outside the door of the main hall, a person walked over from afar. He was dressed in a purple gold robe and a pair of green silk boots. His features were bright and unbelievably handsome. His footsteps were neither fast nor slow as he walked over lazily. The Marquis of Linen, Xieding, first cried out in surprise, "Jing Xing." Then he thought of something and frowned as he looked at the figure, unable to speak. Everyone was surprised. What was the background of today's returning banquet? Not only did Prince Yu, who never appeared at palace banquets, appear, now even the little Marquis of the Xie family, Xie Jingxing, also appeared. And the excited and infatuated look of the womenfolk was no less than when Fu Xiu Yi appeared and even steadily pressed down. The youth's posture was ramrod straight. Although his gait looked casual, each step he took had its own imposing aura. He already had an outstanding appearance to begin with, but now, with the contrast of the purple gold robe, there was a faint feeling that he couldn't be looked at directly. Her face was like snow, her eyes were like lacquer, and her eyebrows were like swords. The corners of her lips were slightly raised, like a red plum blossom that had bloomed amidst the ice and snow. This face that was more delicate than a female's did not have a trace of a female's femininity. Instead, it was like the rising sun in the sky, full of dazzling eyes. When he walked over alone, all the civil and military officials seemed to have become a foil. It was as if the imperial family of Ming-Chi and the dazzling Golden Palace had finally aroused the nobility and arrogance that was engraved in his bones. It was so handsome that it made the heaven and earth lose their colors. And this youth that was like the scorching sun had a dense and sharp gaze. That frivolous smile, if one looked carefully, was full of indifference and cruelty. Chapter 179. When did this little Marquis of the Xie family become so outstanding? Feng and Ning muttered. In the past, even though Xie Jingxing was also very handsome and flamboyant, but compared to him today, he was overshadowed. It was as if the past Xie Jingxing had deliberately covered up the brilliance, but the current Xie Jingxing had removed that layer of concealment. The real him, this elegance, compared to Fu Xiu Yi, it was as if he was the person who should stand at the peak of the dynasty, overlooking all living beings. When this thought came out, Xun Miao was shocked by herself. She looked up at Xie Jingxing. The purple-clad youth walked to the front of the banquet and faced everyone's surprised gaze. He raised his eyebrows and smiled. "Today I am also here to join in the fun." As she spoke, she walked to the banquet and sat down, but it was not beside the Marquis of Lin and Xie Ding, but beside Su Mingfeng. Su Ming Lang pursed his lips and reluctantly moved a small area. Seeing this, Xie Ding's face darkened. When the surrounding people saw it, even though they were discussing it, they did not obstruct it. Xie Jingxing had always had such a frivolous temperament, and most likely today he did it on a whim. The Xie family has produced an extraordinary person. Luo Shui Yan's expression was solemn. Whether it was a dragon or a worm, she had always been accurate in judging people. This Xie Jingxing's actions had a kind of magnanimity that made people feel a little dangerous for no reason. Those who had been on the battlefield were more sensitive to danger. When Xunqiu saw Xie Jingxing, his eyes lit up and he almost stood up. He then scratched his head and grabbed the teacup in front of the table to cover up and gulped a mouthful of tea. This kind of rude behavior caused the surrounding people to look at him strangely. Xunqiu quickly chuckled. This kid from the Xie clan is not bad. Shen Xian was very satisfied. Towards Xie Jingxing, who was able to cause trouble for his old rival, he was unable to express his appreciation in words. If the other party was not from the Xie family, he might have become sworn brothers with the other party. The princes of the Fu clan all had gloomy looks on their faces. This little marquis of the residence of the Marquis of Lin and looked too outstanding. Although he did not enter the imperial court, just based on his unruly temperament, one could already feel that he was not someone who would submit to others. If he couldn't subdue such a person, it was best to kill him as soon as possible. Seeing a marquis's residence that held the commander's seal grow stronger and produce an important figure was not something the imperial family was willing to see. At this moment, the eunuch's drawn-out voice was heard. His Majesty has arrived. Her Majesty the Empress has arrived. The celestial Empress finally arrived as everyone had been waiting for. Emperor Wenhui seemed to be in a good mood, but the Empress was somewhat fierce. As a female, she was considered beautiful, and one could see the charm of her youth, but as she grew older, her cheeks were sunken and she looked somewhat mean. Due to the Crown Prince's illness, the Empress's methods had always been very harsh. Previously, Shun Miao stood on Fu Xiu Yi's side, and after marrying to Fu Xiu Yi, she was often made difficult by this Empress and suffered countless hardships in the hands of this Empress. It was also this Empress who used herself as an example to teach Xin Miao how to survive in the palace. Everything that had happened in the past was just an illusion. She had come for revenge, but her ultimate goal was to completely overthrow the entire royal family. A mayfly trying to shake a tree was like trying to save a cart with a cup of water, just like the distance between her and the Empress. But this Empress seat was originally hers, and one day, she would sit on that seat again. Xin Miao's eyes drooped down and gently picked up the teacup in front of her to take a sip. Not far from her, Xinqing also revealed a slight smile, as if to celebrate with her, and at the same time raised the teacup to take a sip. Her smile seemed to be even more carefree. The blackness in Xin Miao's eyes became thicker and her lips curled up. It was different from a sneer, as this smile had curved eyebrows, and the sweet look was extremely moving. Even at the male side of the banquet, those who noticed this side were dazzled by a Shun Miao smile. Pei Lang kept staring at Xin Miao. He did not know why he did it, as if there was something about this young female that attracted him. But a few months ago, Xin Miao was just an idiot in Guangwentang. Pei Lang treated her warmly, but it was only out of etiquette. In his heart, he looked down on her. The Emperor and Empress sat down, and the banquet began. This so-called monarch and officials enjoying together was just for show. The monarch was still the monarch, and the officials were still officials. Everyone were making harmless jokes, as if it was really the son of heaven and the common people enjoying together. Su Mingfeng nudged Xie Jingxing. "Why are you here? Come to watch the fun?" Xie Jingxing's lips hooked up, and the female side of the banquet suddenly drew in a low breath. "So boring. What fun is there to watch?" Su Mingfeng had a headache. Just as he was speaking, he saw Prince Yu opening his mouth. Imperial older brother. His voice was not high nor low, but the hall immediately quietened down. It was obvious that everyone was extremely fearful of this fiend. A few days ago, this younger brother had already thought clearly about the matter of the consort selection that was promised to this younger brother. Prince Yu smiled strangely. Since today is a happy event, why not have a double happiness? This younger brother is fond of Xin family's young lady. He said it very slowly, and the viper-like light in his eyes was entangled, like maggots in a tarsal bone, tightly climbing in front of the purple-clad young female. Chapter 180. This younger brother likes Shin family's young lady. With an uproar, the hall was instantly in an uproar, and all gazes looked towards the 3D young ladies of the Chun clan. Of the 3 young ladies of the Shun family, Shin Qing was already engaged, leaving only Shin Yu and Shin Miao. Shin Yu was gentle and moving, and her talent had spread far and wide. Now that Shin Miao was a slender and elegant young female, her bearing also made others cast sidelong glances at her. The most important thing was that behind Shin Miao was Shun Xin, this great Buddha, and everyone could see clearly that the person that Prince Yu was looking at was Shin Miao. In a moment, everyone's gaze toward Shin Miao was extremely strange. There were those who rejoiced in her misfortune, and there were also those who pitied her. The previous Princess Yu's death was not clear, and everyone knew that there was something fishy about it. Everyone was well aware of what kind of demonic temperament this Prince Yu had. However, such a person was deeply protected by the royal family. On one side was the dignified General Weiwu, and on the other side was the Emperor's brother who had saved his life. How should he choose? When Prince Yu of the first rank finished speaking, Shin Xion's face sunk, and the veins on his forehead even popped out. The mighty general's reputation had never been undeserved. For a moment, there was a kind of ferocious hostility that overflowed, causing the expressions of the surrounding people to change. This official was a loyal official, but if he could not even protect his own daughter, even if he had to stake his life and meritorious services, Shin Xion would not fear going against Prince Yu. Shin Xiao also tightened his lips and stared fiercely at Prince Yu, as if as long as Prince Yu said Shin Xion's name, he would rush out and fight to the death with Prince Yu. As for Luo Shuiyin, she was already holding Shin Miao's hand tightly. Her carefree smile had long fallen and was replaced with a deep ruthlessness, as if she was a mother wolf protecting her cub and did not give in to the other's coercion. When the surrounding people saw the Shun family's behavior, they could not help but exclaim in their hearts. Now that Emperor Wenhui was on the high seat, and the Shin family made such a stance, there was a feeling of swords being drawn in the air. Emperor Wenhui was overly suspicious, and the Shin family had no fear even though they were above the Emperor's prestige. Were they not afraid of leaving a knot in Emperor Wenhui's heart in the future? Prince Ding's eyes also moved slightly, and there was a trace of surprise in his eyes when he looked at Shin Miao. It seems that this 5th Shin young lady is indeed General Shin's treasure. Su Mingfeng whispered to Xie Jingxing, the Shin family can actually do this for her. Going against Prince Yu was equivalent to going against the imperial family. No matter what, the Shin family's actions at this moment had clearly expressed their unyielding attitude. One feared that even if Emperor Wenhui issued a decree, the Shin family would not easily agree to it. Xie Jingxing smiled lazily and declined to comment. In the corner, Pei Lang tightened his grip on his teacup. What would the girl who shot an arrow at her classmate without blinking during the academy examination do? Emperor Wenhui's smile was somewhat unfathomable, and the gaze that he looked at the Shun family was somewhat dark. He said, "Which young lady of the Shun family did royal younger brother fancy?" Everyone was waiting for Prince Yu's answer. A carefree smile floated on Shun Qing's face, but before that smile could rise higher, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his abdomen and could not help but cry out miserably as he clutched his abdomen and fell to the ground. What happened? Qinger! Shun Qing's sudden action made everyone jump in shock. Ren Wanyin immediately hugged her, and Shin Qing's face quickly turned pale. Shin Yu pulled the corner of Chun Rochio's clothes, and the latter's heart jumped. She did not know why, but she looked toward Shin Miao. But one saw the purple-clad young female sitting at the table, and her expression did not waver. When she met Shin Rochio's gaze, she gently smiled and turned to look at Luo Shuiyin before asking worriedly, "What happened to eldest sister? Could it be that she was poisoned?" Chapter 181. Poisoned. When the words were said, the surroundings suddenly became chaotic. Shin Miao did not let it go and continued to look at Luo Shuiyin. Could it be that an assassin sneaked in? This time, not only the female guests, even the male guests, the few princes and emperor Wenhui's face changed. During the returning banquet, all the civil and military officials were present, and if an assassin sneaked in, the imperial family would be in danger. Immediately, the guards outside all rushed in, and their hands were on the swords at their waists as they watched the surrounding movements like a tiger watching its prey. One was the possibility of an assassin sneaking in, and the other was Shun Qing, who was lying on the ground moaning in pain. As such, no one cared about Prince Yu's words about marrying a young lady from the Shin family. After all, compared to these rumors, one's life was more important. Su Ming Feng opened his mouth, and after a long while he whispered in admiration, "Good means." With just one sentence from Shun Miao, the focus of everyone's attention was shifted. The current chaos and tension made Prince Yu look like a fool. Xie Jingxing swept a glance at the young female, who had a worried face and lightly snorted. Shun Miao's eyes slightly moved. After being with the Fu family for so many years, no one understood the Fu family's suspicions better than her. Shun Qing's appearance, with a slight mention of this moment, was enough to make Emperor Wen Hui, who had been assassinated numerous times, to become a bird that was startled by the mere twang of a bow. "Mother, it is better to find an imperial physician for eldest sister." Shun Miao said, "This cannot go on." Luo Shui Yin then recovered to her senses and frowned as she looked at Ren Wanyan. Shin Qing was in such pain, but as a mother, Ren Wanyan did not think to find a physician for her daughter. She did not know how this mother was doing. Immediately, Luo Shui Yin bowed to Emperor Wen Hui. "This official's wife earnestly requests your majesty to summon an imperial physician to take a look at Qing'er's illness and solve the crisis." When the words were said, Shin Qing had not even spoken when Ren Wanyan screamed, "No!" Everyone's eyes landed on Ren Wanyan. When Ren Wanyan spoke, her heart knew that it was not good. Facing so many probing eyes, she forced a smile and gritted her teeth. This official's wife. This official's wife is saying how can Qing'er trouble the imperial physician. Do not spoil everyone's mood. This official's wife will just bring Qing'er down. What are you talking about? Luo Shui Yin said seriously, "Nothing is more important than one's life. Could it be that you as a mother feel that Qing'er's life is not as important as the banquet hall?" Everyone's expression was very strange. Looking at the current situation, it seemed that Ren Wanyan, who was the biological mother, was not willing to look for the imperial physician, and Luo Shui Yin, as the Shu, was enthusiastically concerned about Shin Qing's life and death. At the male side of the banquet, Shun Gui stared at Ren Wanyan with a heavy expression. He could not wait for this mother and daughter pair to not have any relationship with him. If Emperor Wen Hui was unhappy because of this, what would happen to his future career? Eldest Shin Foreign is right. It was the Empress who lightly spoke. She glanced at Ren Wanyan. Eldest Shin young lady's injury is more important. The returning banquet is not as important as one's life. Ren Wanyan's heart panicked. If Shun Qing was seen by the physician, wouldn't the matter of the fetus in her womb be exposed in front of others? She said, "Nyang nyang," or "I'm fine." Shun Qing's forehead was oozing big drops of sweat, and her complexion was as pale as paper. It was obvious that she was in extreme pain. She clutched her stomach and was unable to speak, but she knew that she could not let the imperial physician come over, so she suppressed the pain and said, "Eldest sister, this is not only related to your safety, but also the safety of everyone in the hall. If you were really poisoned, it means that an assassin had mixed in and everyone would be in danger. Even if you do not think for yourself, you should think for His Majesty." Shun Miao's calm voice sounded. Chapter 182. When she finished her words, Emperor Wen Hui's gaze became somewhat serious. Shin Qing almost vomited blood from Shun Miao's words. What else could Shin Qing say? Could it be that she dared not to think for the emperor? The few princes of the Fu family also heard Shun Miao's meaning. Prince Li paused for a moment before saying, "This young lady of the Shun family is born with a sharp mouth. Someone come." Without any hesitation, Emperor Wen Hui said, "Go and invite the imperial physician." Something happened to the young lady of the Shen family in the palace, so naturally Jin must investigate clearly. Eldest sister must also not move. Shin Miao lightly said, Perhaps the murderer is mixed in the crowd at this moment. When the imperial physician arrives, he will take eldest sister's pulse here. Else one fear that there will be a problem if the blood flow is affected. Ren Wanyin did not have time to speak when Emperor Wenhui nodded his head. Correct. With a single sentence, he had sealed off all possibilities. To let the imperial physician examine Xinqing in public meant that the matter of Xinqing's pregnancy would be exposed in front of all the civil and military officials. Thinking of this, Ren Wanyun's body could not stop trembling, and her fear finally spread to Xinqing. Xinqing endured the pain, and her heart was filled with even more fear. Mother, don't. But what could Ren Wanyun do? Emperor Wenhui had already spoken, and she could not defy the decree. She was just a woman and naturally could act unreasonably in the inner courtyard. But in front of the Emperor, Empress, and hundreds of officials, Ren Wanyun was at a loss. She raised her head and looked towards Shen Gui's direction, hoping that Shen Gui would help her, but when she met Shen Gui's eyes, there was only blame and anger. In a moment, Ren Wanyun's hands and feet turned cold, and her heart was filled with despair. She did not even bother to comfort Xinqing, who was in her embrace, and only slumped to the ground absent-mindedly. "What is wrong with your Xinqing?" Feng and Ning whispered to Shen Miao. "Why does she look like she is very afraid?" Shen Miao smiled, and Luo Shuiyin also frowned. Ren Wanyun's abnormal behavior made her feel somewhat strange. But he could not think of any reason, so he looked towards Chun Roqiu and Shenyu at the side. Shenyu was frightened by Xinqing's appearance and was somewhat flustered as she grabbed onto Chun Roqiu's clothes. Chun Roqiu also stared at Ren Wanyun motionlessly. After being Ren Wanyun's sister-in-law for so many years, Chun Roqiu naturally knew that her second saw had always been able to deal with all kinds of situations with ease. There could only be one reason for her to lose her composure today, and that was that she had fallen into a trap. Shenyu whispered, "Eldest sister would not really be poisoned." "Mother, is it fifth younger sister? You are—" Chun Roqiu sternly stopped her and could not help but look at Shen Miao, who was at the side. Separated by a few people, one could not see Shen Miao's gaze, but seeing that the corner of her mouth seemed to be slightly raised, Chun Roqiu could not help but be shocked. Her intuition told her that today's matter was definitely related to Shen Miao, but was Shen Miao really so daring to poison the palace? But no matter what, Xinqing's reputation could no longer be preserved. Prince Yu of the First Rank's face also sunk because of the sudden change. Even though his actions were absurd, he was able to distinguish the priorities, and this was definitely not a good time to mention the matter just now. A sarcastic smile floated on his lips. Today Shen Miao managed to escape a calamity, and no matter if Shen Miao was the one who poisoned Xinqing. Shen Miao's thoughts were too simple to be able to hold him back. Afterwards, he could still mention the matter to Emperor Wenhui. There were some matters that one could not escape from. The imperial physician quickly rushed over. What was unexpected was that the imperial physicians in the palace were all elderly people. Because of their rich experience, they were able to enter the Imperial Physician Academy. However, the Imperial Physician who came was only in his early 20s. He was also very handsome, which made some of the young ladies from official families stare at him. Chapter 183. The moment Shen Miao saw this Imperial Physician, her heart thumped, and she carefully sized up that Imperial Physician. The young Imperial Physician carried his medical box, and after bowing to the Emperor and Empress, he walked over to Ren Wanyun's side. Ren Wanyun still wanted to block, but heard the Imperial Physician say, "Will Furin please let go of young Lady Shen, so that this one can take young Lady Shen's pulse?" His voice was very pleasant to the ear and made one's heart feel comfortable. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, and with the sharp eyes of the Emperor and Empress, no matter what Ren Wanyun did, she did not dare to go against him. Xinqing had already fainted from the pain. She took a step back and watched as that Imperial Physician placed 2 fingers on Xinqing's wrist. Just as Shen Miao was in a daze looking at that Imperial Physician, Feng and Ning's joking voice was suddenly heard. "Could it be that you also fancy that Imperial Physician? If you fancy him, then it is not considered that your eyesight is bad." Shen Miao was slightly startled and asked, "You know him?" "Eh," Feng and Ning said in surprise. This is the first time you are interested in the things that I am talking about. Never mind. I will also be merciful and tell you that this imperial physician is a new physician in the Imperial Medical Institution. His medical skills are amazing, and even Consort Des heart pain was cured. His Majesty valued him and made an exception to let him enter the Imperial Medical Institution. Now he is the youngest official in the Imperial Medical Institution and is very good looking. So many young ladies like him. Shun Miao said, "You also like him?" "How could I like him?" Feng and Ning raised her neck. Even though his medical skills are high and he is good looking, but at best he is just an imperial physician and does not have any family backing him. He is all alone in the world. How could such a person think of my family? Even you, although you like her, if you really want to match her, then you're still a bit lacking. Feng and Ning had been pampered by her family since she was young and firmly believed that her husband was an earth-shattering person. She really did not put a small imperial physician in her eyes. "What is his name?" Shun Miao asked. "Could it be that you really like him?" Feng and Ning looked suspiciously at Shun Miao before saying, "Called Gao Yang. But in the official families of the Ding capital, there is no one with the surname Gao." That was to say that this Gao Yang was definitely not from a big family. Shun Miao looked at the young imperial physician and even ignored Xin Qing and Ren Wanyun. There was some fluctuation in her heart because Shun Miao discovered that this Gao Yang actually gave her a familiar feeling, as if she had seen him somewhere before. However, she had never seen Gao Yang in the Imperial Academy of Medicine in her previous life. If it wasn't at the Imperial Academy of Medicine, where else could it be? While he was thinking, Gao Yang had already finished taking the pulse. When he turned back, he met Shun Miao's sizing gaze and was slightly startled, but he quickly recovered and cupped his hands towards Ren Wanyun. "Imperial Physician Gao." The Empress opened her mouth. "Is the young lady of the Shun family poisoned?" Gao Yang looked at Xin Qing, who had fainted, and then looked at the pale Ren Wanyun before cupping his hands in greeting. "Replying to your ladyship's words, the young lady of the Shin family was not poisoned and only drank the clear lotus tea." After a pause, he continued, "The clear lotus tea that young lady Shin drank was not poisoned, and young lady Shin was also not poisoned." "Oh!" Emperor Wenhui looked at Xin Qing. "Since she was not poisoned, then how could it be like this?" "Replying to your majesty." Gao Yang sighed. "The clear lotus tea is cold in nature, and there is no harm for ordinary people to drink, but for a pregnant person to drink it, it would affect the fetus. The young lady of the Shin family is already pregnant." The young lady of the Shin family was already pregnant. When the words were said, there was an uproar in the surroundings. Shun Gui opened his mouth, and his face turned purple in a moment. He suddenly looked at Ren Wanyun, and the latter was paralyzed on the ground in a daze. "Good." The one who spoke was that Wei family foreign. She suddenly stood up and did not care where she was and pointed at Ren Wanyun as she scolded. "You are engaged to my Wei family and actually want my Wei family to marry a Yu Shu to raise a son for others. Ren Wanyun, do you still have any face?" Chapter 184. The surrounding people became even more noisy because of Wei Foreign's words. Some time ago, the marriage between Xin Qing and the Wei family was spread in an uproar, and today she was diagnosed to be pregnant in front of all the civil and military officials. What kind of logic was this? A virgin girl was actually pregnant. Was this an illicit affair? She even wanted to marry into the Wei family with her body? Since the ancient times, it was considered a great wonder in Mingqi. Ren Wanyun still did not move. Her entire body seemed to have lost its strength, and only half crawled to Xin Qing's side and held her in her arms. "Shen Foreign, Ben Gong also want to know what is going on," the Empress said coldly from the high seat. Even though Ming Qi was considered to be open-minded about the matters between men and women, but to get pregnant before marriage and have an illicit affair was a matter that would throw the family's face. Once it was discovered, one would be drowned. The Shin family was the head of the Ming Qi's official family, and even though Shun Gui's official position was not as high as Shin Xian's, it was not considered low. The higher Xin Qing's status was, the worse the impact of this matter would be. The Empress was in charge of the 6 palaces and could not bear to see such dirty matters. Almost everyone could hear the coldness in her voice. Ren Wanyun only felt bitterness in her mouth, and was unable to say a word. What could she say? Could she say that Shun Qing did not have an illicit affair, but was raped? But no matter what, it was a fact that her innocence was ruined. As for Prince Yu of the first rank, she could not say a single word. Prince Yu of the first rank was a person who haggled over every penny, and if one were to bite him, one feared that there would be no good fruit to eat. If Shin Foreign does not speak, then let young Lady Shin speak. The Empress' eyes suddenly turned sharp as she instructed the palace maids beside her. Go and wake young Lady Shin up. Ben Gong has something to ask. Ren Wanyin was shocked, but the palace maids beside the Empress had already walked forward. Their actions were very fast, and Ren Wanyin did not even have time to stop them before the two palace maids violently pinched Shinqing awake. When Shinqing woke up, her abdomen was still in pain, but she heard the Empress coldly asking from the high seat, Shinqing, Ben Gong ask you, who is the father of the flesh and blood in your abdomen? When Shinqing heard this, her body stiffened, and she looked towards Ren Wanyin for help. In a moment of desperation, Ren Wanyin shook her head at Shinqing and told her not to speak nonsense. As for the future, Ren Wanyin would think of a way to rescue her. When Shinqing saw Ren Wanyin shaking her head, she did not understand her meaning, but did not dare to speak carelessly, so she stammered, This official's daughter. This official's daughter. She could not say no matter what. Shin Miao sighed softly and said, Eldest sister better say it out. Now that one has committed a serious crime, and since there is such an ending, one cannot let you bear the burden of this life alone. Ren Wanyin looked at Shin Miao fiercely and could not wait to tear Shin Miao's mouth apart. Chun Qing's body trembled, and her eyes were filled with terror. The meaning of Shin Miao's words was that she would not be able to escape death. Between life and death, Shin Qing did not care about anything else and suddenly shouted, No, no, my child belongs to His Highness the Prince of First Rank. The child in my belly is the flesh and blood of His Highness the Prince. Today was really a wave rising before the first splash had even calmed down. A good returning banquet actually involved so many things. Prince Yu of the first rank. Everyone looked towards Prince Yu, and the latter narrowed his eyes, but his expression was very gloomy when he looked at Shinqing. Qinger, do not talk nonsense. Ren Wanyin rushed over to cover Shinqing's mouth, but words that were said were like water that was spilled out and could not be taken back. Shinqing's eyes widened as she stared at Prince Yu. Her thinking was very simple. Since there was an illicit relationship with an outsider, premarital pregnancy was a necessary ending, but as long as the child in her belly was Prince Yu's flesh and blood, then it would be related to the imperial bloodline. In this way, it would be equivalent to having a life-saving talisman. In any case, the emperor would not order the execution of his own nephew. Shin Miao looked at Shinqing and felt it was somewhat funny in her heart. She could roughly guess what Shinqing was thinking in her heart, but she had forgotten that there was a trick in this world called, Get rid of the mother, but keep the child. In the inner palace, this trick was never tired of being used 100 times. Did Shinqing really think that with that little bit of flesh and blood, she would be able to live safe and sound? It was just that she would die faster. Chapter 185. The Emperor and Empress's expression was uncertain. If Prince Yu was involved at this time, it would not be that simple. At the male side of the banquet, Shin Xiao and Shin Xian looked at each other. Shin Xian was still all right and was somewhat stunned by the matter, but Shin Xiao secretly clenched his fists. Previously, Shin Miao did not dare to tell him who was the person who raped Shinqing, but now everything was clear. No wonder Shin Miao was unwilling to say, it was Prince Yu of the first rank. Once he thought that if it was not for Shin Miao's good luck, the one who would end up in Shinqing's situation would be his own younger sister. Shin Xiao's heart gave birth to a melancholy feeling. Prince Yu did not admit it, but also did not deny it. As such, it could almost be confirmed. Everyone looked at Shinqing with sympathy and pity. Prince Yu of the first rank had always liked to use various means to secretly abduct young females, and even dared to touch the daughter of an official. Now the unlucky person was coincidentally Shinqing. In the silence, Shin Miao's voice rang softly. No wonder His Highness the First Rank proposed to marry the Shun family's young lady. So it was to give eldest sister a status. These words were light, but it made everyone present to be enlightened. No wonder it was like this. Just now Prince Yu of the First Rank said that he wanted to marry a Wang Fei and was interested in the Shun family's young lady. So it was actually Shun Qing, and now there was even a child. In a moment, the gaze that looked at Shun Qing changed. As such, it did not seem that Prince Yu was forcing her, but Shun Qing was willing to be a Wang Fei. This fifth Shin young lady is very powerful, Su Mingfeng said in surprise. The ability to invert black and white is also extremely high. Most of the people were led by the nose, but it did not represent everyone. Those who were clear-minded could still remember that when Prince Yu of the First Rank said that he wanted to marry the Shun family's young lady, he was looking at Xin Miao. Xie Jingxing crossed his arms and looked at the purple-clad young female opposite him with a smile that was not a smile. One did not know when it started, but everyone at the palace banquet was led by the nose by Xin Miao. Now that things had developed to this stage, it was all within her calculations. And it was not that there was no danger in this. She was bold enough to gamble, and her moves were accurate. She took everyone's reactions into account and played a good move. Since it was so, he did not mind adding fuel to the fire. Immediately Xie Jingxing also said, "It is good to have affection and righteousness." The emperor's brows wrinkled imperceptibly. One had to know that even though Prince Yu of the First Rank would mess around in the past, he would not bring these matters to the stage. No matter how it was in private, there would always be a way to solve it, but to place it in public, to punish this imperial younger brother? One was afraid that Prince Yu's heart would be filled with resentment, and this matter would be forgotten. When the emperor shielded like this and followed the example of the subordinates, it would not be able to awe the officials. As for Xin Miao and Xie Jingxing's words, it was a very good idea. If it was said that these two people were in love with each other, there was nothing wrong with it. He looked at the Empress, and the Empress understood and said, "So the young lady that royal brother mentioned was the young lady of the Xin family. But both of you are too reckless. And causing such a big disaster. What would happen in the future?" Xin Qing's heart heaved a sigh of relief. Ignoring the pain in her abdomen, she crawled up and knelt on the ground to kowtow and pleaded, "It is all this official's daughter's fault, but this official's daughter cannot bear to part with the flesh and blood in her abdomen. I beseech your majesty and your ladyship to look at the child in this official's daughter's abdomen and spare this official's daughter this time." Booing sounds rang out. This time, Xin Qing did not have any dignity at all and only lost her face. The Empress also looked at her with disgust, but said lightly, "It is difficult to escape the blame. But since today is the returning banquet, it is a happy event, and imperial younger brother has been a widower for so many years. So Ben Gong will do a good deed today. Giving the two of you a marriage bestowed upon you is also a golden marriage." Xin Qing managed to keep her life and quickly said with joy, "Thanking your majesty and thanking your ladyship." She did not know how shameful her actions were in the eyes of others. In the past, Xin Qing only said that Xin Miao could not be seen in public, but now Xin Qing herself had become the daughter of the Shun family that could not be seen in public. Prince Yu of the First Rank looked at Xin Qing darkly before his eyes turned and landed on Xin Miao. Sitting high up, the emperor stared at him with a warning stare, and Prince Yu of the First Rank could only cup his hands and slowly said, "Thanking imperial older brother and imperial saw for fulfilling my wish." It was just that only the person involved knew the chill in those words. The corner of Xin Miao's lips rose as she looked at Prince Yu fearlessly. In that pair of clear eyes, there was a look of joy, but there was a trace of fierceness hidden in that joy, as if it was a ferocious beast. Today was only the opening dish, and the real thing that was left for Prince Yu residence was still at the back. To clear all the plans that Prince Yu had planned in front of him. Presumably, at this moment Prince Yu's heart was already extremely furious. When one was angry, it was most easy to make mistakes, and this mistake was like the wrong moves on the chessboard. Taking advantage of the victory to pursue and destroy the pawns and chariots, one would be able to win very quickly. She tilted her head, and her eyes were abnormally bright, but if one looked carefully at the smile on her lips, there was a kind of chilling terror. It has begun. Prince Yu of the first rank. Chapter 186. A proper homecoming banquet had ended in this sudden turn of events. Emperor Wen Hui's mood was disturbed, and not long after, he flicked his sleeves, and the Empress also said that she was tired. Since the Emperor and Empress had left, the officials naturally knew that they could not stay for long, and one after another found excuses to leave. Even though today's matter seemed to have found a perfect ending with the eldest young lady of the Shun family marrying into Prince Yu residence, but those with discerning eyes knew that it was a shocking scandal. As for that eldest young lady of the Shin family, once she marries into Prince Yu residence, it would naturally bode ill rather than well. Luo Shui Yin held Shin Miao's hands tightly. She did not know how Shin Qing and Prince Yu would have an affair, but because of this she was more worried about Shin Miao's safety. She only felt that the danger in the Ding capital was no less than the Northwest Desert. Shin Xiao did not say a word until he left. He had always been cheerful, and it made Shin Xin think that he was feeling sad because of Shun Qing's matter. But he did not know that Shin Xiao's heart was already extremely angry and felt that he had nowhere to vent his anger. He hated the Shin family's second household for being vicious, and also hated Prince Yu's shamelessness. Shin Qing had long been brought away by Run Wanyin in a hurry, but Shun Gui's expression was very interesting, and everyone looked at him with meaningful eyes. Some colleagues who did not get along with him in court even threw stones at him when he was down. They cupped their hands and smiled. Congratulations to Shindarin. To be able to become in-laws with His Highness Prince Yu is a great blessing. If it was in the past, when Shin Qing married Prince Yu, it would not be a big deal to Shin Gui. As long as it could help his career, his daughter's happiness was not important. But now, Shin Qing's performance had obviously brought trouble to Prince Yu. Would Prince Yu vent his anger on him? As he thought about it, Shin Gui's heart gave birth to some irritation and fear. After the returning banquet dispersed, Luo Shuiyin and Shin Miao walked out of the palace, and when they passed by a corridor, Shin Miao softly reminded her, "Be careful. There is a loose brick here." Luo Shuiyin was a military general, and her steps were big and heavy. If one step was taken, one might stumble. Luo Shuiyin took a careful look before smiling. Almost fell. Then she was surprised and looked at Shin Miao. How did Jiao Jiao know? Shin Miao choked. She had lived in the palace for decades and had long remembered what it was like. When Luo Shuiyin asked, she could only reply, "1 year I tripped here, and since then I've remembered it." "I see." Luo Shuiyin laughed heartily. Jiao Jiao is quite smart. She remembers the places where she fell, so she won't fall again. Shin Miao's heart moved, but she did not speak. As the two of them walked, they saw two people who looked like guards dragging a young eunuch past. The young eunuch's mouth was stuffed with a handkerchief, and he seemed to be struggling with all his might. However, how could he struggle free from the tall and strong guards? Following behind them was the head eunuch, Eunuch Gao. "Shin Foreign, Shin Young Miss." Eunuch Gao stopped and greeted them. "Eunuch Gao, this is..." Luo Shuiyin looked at the little eunuch and asked. The newcomer doesn't know the rules and made a mistake. "I'm taking him to be punished," Eunuch Gao said with a sharp voice. When that young eunuch saw Shin Miao, his eyes landed on Jing, who was behind Shin Miao, and suddenly struggled like crazy, as if he wanted to rush to Jing's side. "Be more honest." Eunuch Gao kicked the young eunuch's knee, and the latter gave a muffled grunt before kneeling down. Eunuch Gao snorted from his nose, thing that does not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Almost offended a noble person. Luo Shuiyin frowned. She did not like these inhumane punishments in the palace, and this kind of scene would make her heart uncomfortable. She immediately said to Eunuch Gao, "Since that is the case, one will not disturb Eunuch Gao's work." Chapter 187. Gao Gonggong quickly responded with a smile. It was Shin Miao who suddenly opened her mouth and softly said, "Since one has committed a mistake, naturally one should be punished." Everyone looked at her strangely, and the little eunuch's body trembled as he looked at Shin Miao with a trace of resentment. Shen Miao did not bother about it, and pulled Luo Shuiyin to leave. Before leaving, she lightly said, "If one does not know the rules, then one must be taught. The palace cannot be compared to the outside, and today is different from the past." As Shen Miao and Entourage's figures gradually went further away, Gao Gonggong said to the two guards, "What are you waiting for? Let's go." Xiao Lizi's heart was filled with unwillingness, and his face was filled with fear. He did not know what he had done wrong. In the little garden of the returning banquet, Shen Miao's personal maid, Jing, gave him an ingot of silver and said to her that eldest Shen young lady was not feeling well and did not drink the wine prepared for the palace banquet. She only needed a cup of clear lotus tea and would have to trouble her to make an exception during the banquet. He felt that this matter was very simple, and he could obtain an ingot of silver, so why not? Moreover, if he could please this young lady of the Shen family, perhaps there would be a benefactor in the future. But no matter how Xiao Lizi calculated, he did not expect that Shen Qing was actually pregnant, and that clear lotus tea became the main culprit that triggered everything. It could be said that that cup of clear lotus tea caused a disaster, and the source of this cup of tea, after investigating, was traced back to him. Xiao Lizi explained countless of times, but no one believed his words, and the silver that he received was the most common silver, not even the official silver. How would a noble young lady use this kind of common silver as a reward? No one believed his words, and he was a wicked person. What was waiting for him? Outside, Shen Miao was quietly walking. She was clearer than anyone about what was waiting for Xiao Lizi. The palace was a place where it was easy to invert black and white. If one stood high, one would have the ability to turn black into white, and if one was originally very short, then one would be sorry as the white would become black. In the beginning, when Fu Xiu just ascended the throne, Xiao Lizi was Gao Gonggong's dog that came and went at his beck and call. It was she who pitied Xiao Lizi and was willing to give him face in the palace. Later, Xiao Lizi became Eunuch Li, and she became a deposed empress. This eunuch that she had personally promoted even personally sent her on her last journey and gave her a piece of advice. Today is different from the past. Now, she could be considered to have returned those words back to him. This life was different from the past. Now, she was the daughter of the first wife of a high and mighty official, while the other party was just a lowly speck of dust. She didn't even bother to waste too much energy on him. This was a clean and efficient way, which was very good. She and Luo Shuiyin walked in front, but did not know that behind the winding corridors, there was someone looking at her back and sighing. Does this young lady of the Shen family have enmity with that little eunuch? For no reason at all. A life was lost. Beside him, Xie Jingxing sneered at him. When did you become compassionate? A doctor should have the heart of a parent. Gao Yang waved his fan and suddenly thought of something. His expression became serious as he said, "The young lady of the Shun family is not simple." Just now in the hall, she looked at me for a long time. Could it be that she discovered my identity? Impossible. Then the way she looked at me was really scary. Gao Yang touched his chin and seriously thought for a while before speaking. Could it be that she is pleased with me? Xie Jingxing stared at him without any expression and spat out a word, scram. You are really not interesting. Gao Yang shook his head in regret, even though the important matter is pressing. But your temper is getting fiercer and fiercer. It is better to relax. Xie Jingxing looked far away and said, Yu Shu is here. What? Gao Yang was surprised when... Chapter 188. Yesterday, Gao Yang's expression gradually turned solemn. Could it be that you want it? Correct. Ding Capital, Shin Residence, Kai Yun Yuan. With a pile slap, a clear finger mark appeared on Shin Qing's face, and her lips turned red. Shingai, what are you doing? Ren Wan Yin shouted in a stern voice and protected Shin Qing in her bosom, while looking at Shin Gui with a fierce look in her eyes. What am I doing? Shin Gui's smile was sinister like a wolf. If it was not for the trace of sentiments, he would really want to kill the two people in front of him. He said, What did you do today? What? Ren Wan Yin was not to be outdone. Can this matter be blamed on Qing? You are Qing father, and you do not help your own daughter and still hit her. Shin Gui, you have no conscience. Daughter? Shingue laughed in anger. I, Shingue, do not have such a daughter. Shameless and flirt around. Also pregnant with a vile spawn. Really not even comparable to the prostitutes in the brothel. Shinqing's body trembled violently, and her pair of eyes were somewhat blurry. When Ren Wanyun saw this, her heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. If Shingue had a trace of father-daughter relationship with Shinqing, he would not use such vicious words to talk about his own daughter. Ren Wanyun handed Shinqing over to Chun Tao and stood up with a sneer. Shingue, touch your conscience and ask yourself, for Qing'er to be like this today, who is the one who harmed her? Is it me? It is Shun Miao, that little slut. Why do you not go and find trouble with Shun Miao? Oh, you are afraid. You are afraid that when eldest brother and eldest Saw return, you will not be able to touch that little slut. You are angry at Qing, but don't forget that you also had a part in the matter at Wulong Temple. Now you have to take good care of yourself and push everything to Qing, and me. This old woman will not fall for your tricks. If you provoke me, I will tell the matter to eldest brother and eldest Saw, and none of us will be able to gain anything. You. Shingue had been husband and wife with Ren Wanyun for many years, but had never seen Ren Wanyun acting like a shrew. What made him feel uneasy was that Ren Wanyun actually used this matter to threaten him. Even though Shingue was a slick person, he was extremely timid, and this could be seen from how he did not dare to provoke Prince Yu. Now that Shin Xin and wife had returned to the residence, he dared not find trouble with Shin Miao. If Ren Wanyun really dared to divulge this matter, Shingue believed that Shin Xin would chop him in half. Thinking of this, Shingue said angrily, You shrew, you are so unreasonable. Even if I told you, I wouldn't be able to explain myself. I'm leaving. With that he fled. Looking at the back view of Shingue leaving in a hurry, Ren Wanyun's face was filled with ridicule. She knew her husband the best. Shingue was a person who bullied the weak and feared the strong. Marrying such a person, now she could not even protect her daughter. There was no doubt that Shin Miao had given Ren Wanyun a fatal blow. To Ren Wanyun, it was more painful to see her own daughter step by step towards destruction than to kill her. At this point, with the Empress bestowing marriage, no matter how capable Ren Wanyun was, she would not be able to change anything. Shin Miao, this debt, Ren Wanyun will not settle it with you and swear that I am not a human. She gritted her teeth until her lips bled. In the western courtyard, after Shin Xin and wife returned to their own room, Shin Xiu was still sitting there without moving. He had a wooden face as he sat in front of Shin Miao's table like a door god. This young general usually looked like a spring breeze, but once his face turned black, there was a bloody smell of a man on the battlefield. Bai Lu and Shuangjiang were somewhat afraid and did not dare to go forward. Eldest brother. Shin Miao sent Shun Xin and wife back to the room and sat opposite him. Younger sister, I have thought and thought. Shin Xiu said, This matter cannot be let go like this. My heart is feeling stifled. The matter that he was talking about was the matter between Shun Qing and Prince Yu. Even though Shin Miao had concealed a part of it previously, but after the returning banquet, Shin Xiu could more or less guess the ins and outs of the matter. It was because he knew that this matter was done in a vicious and absurd manner that Shin Xiu was so angry. The youngest younger sister in their family was actually schemed against him this year and almost lost her life. If something really happened, Shin Xiu dared not imagine how much regret they would have. Chapter 189. Shin Miao looked at him, and Shin Xiu was still speaking. The more I think, the angrier I get. Younger sister, do not stop me. Even if I have to risk this life, I will not let them have it easy. Eldest brother. Shin Miao sighed. I've already said that there is no evidence for this matter. Since they are doing things, naturally there would not be a single drop of water leaking out. Moreover, this involves Prince Yu of the first rank, and against Prince Yu, the imperial family would give protection. If you were to jump out, you would be standing on the opposite side of the imperial family. Do you want to kill father and mother? Shin Xiu was surprised for a moment. Shin Miao's words were too rational and made him ignore the disrespect and disdain in Shin Miao's tone towards the imperial family of Mingqi. He knew that what Xin Miao said was not wrong. In the beginning, there were many noble families that were defiled by Prince Yu, and those families did not have a reputation higher than the Xin family. But at the end, they were all raised high and lowered low. Behind Prince Yu residence was the highest power in Mingqi, and to clash with it was like hitting a stone with an egg. But he still felt very depressed in his heart. He asked, "We can't just let it go like this. Eldest brother, play a game with me." Xin Miao said, "What time is it?" Xin Xiu scratched his head. "Besides, I thought you didn't like to play chess?" Xin Miao did not continue his words and set up the chessboard. She picked up the black pieces and gave the white pieces to Xin Xiu. Two armies against each other. This is your troops, and this is my troops. Using the pieces as pawns, the generals and commanders will be divided. How about we fight for the world? Xin Xiu had always been passionate about the battlefield, and when he heard this, he became interested and said, "All right." Even though he was a military general, he was proficient in chess. This was because there were many similarities between playing chess and fighting a war. An exquisite chess game could sometimes reveal countless tactics. The white and black pieces fell on the chessboard, creating deep ditches. The black and white looked like a real battlefield. Xin Miao's chess moves were slow. It did not mean that her movements were slow, but it was very gentle. It was different from Xin Xiu's sonorous moves and had a kind of gentleness. This kind of feeling made Xin Xiu feel as if he was being ground by a blunt knife. No matter how Xin Xiu's white pieces threatened her, she remained motionless and maintained her own rhythm, placing the black pieces unhurriedly. Although it looked like she was at a disadvantage, the number of black pieces in her hand was not one less. Occasionally, when Xin Xiu was about to devour her black pieces, she would slyly escape. After the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, all the white and black pieces on the table were still there. No one had gained the upper hand, and no one had taken a single piece from the other. It was just that one could clearly see that it had always been Xin Xiu's white pieces that held the initiative, and the black pieces were forced to a corner by the white pieces. If this continued, Xin Xiu would have to speed up his pace, and he would be able to nibble away Xin Miao's white pieces one by one. Xin Xiu said, "Younger sister, your method of escaping is quite good, but don't tell me you want to spend the night with me like this. I'm going to attack." "Just nice." Xin Miao smiled slightly. "I also intend to do the same." Before she finished speaking, the black piece in her hand suddenly fell to a tricky position. Xin Xiu's brows furrowed tightly. Just that one position seemed to change the situation of the entire game. He was surprised in his heart. Previously, the white pieces were pressuring step by step, but now it was like a cocoon of one's own making. He was trapped in Xin Miao's single black piece that reversed the overall situation and was unable to make a move. Following that, Xin Miao changed her previous style of only attacking and not defending, and her moves were swift and fierce. She swept away Xin Xiu's white pieces in big mouthfuls, and in less than a quarter of an hour, Xin Xiu's previously full of white pieces was only left with one. "I have lost." Xin Xiu laughed bitterly and looked at Xin Miao in amazement. "Younger sister, when did your chess skills improve to such an extent?" Using the chess game as a battlefield, he, a military general, was completely defeated by his own younger sister. It was simply a big joke if it was set out. But his heart was also very surprised. What Xin Miao displayed was not the control of the pieces, but the understanding of the overall situation. From the previous weak style to the final swift and fierce moves, her expression was calm. Perhaps how this game of chess would move was all within her grasp. Chapter 190. I do not want to play chess with eldest brother. Xin Miao shook her head and said, "Previously, eldest brother asked me if we will just forget about it and play a game of chess. What does eldest brother think?" Xin Xiu was surprised for a moment and then jumped in shock. The black pieces were gentle at the start and only attacked without defending, but at the end it suddenly turned around and reversed the entire situation and swallowed the opponent clean. The meaning was that Xin Miao was gentle towards Shun Qing's matter and did not resist. It was not because she planned to forget about it, but she was waiting for an opportunity, waiting for those people to deal with Shun Miao to fall into a trap of their own making, and then she would make a move and return with a full load. There are many ways to achieve one's goal. Under the light, the young female's fingers were holding a black piece. The white fingers and the black piece formed a sharp contrast, and there was a strange kind of beauty. Her voice was light. If this road does not work, then change to another road. If it is not possible to do it openly, then do it secretly. They have already blocked their own way out. Next, it is our turn to play chess. Looking at the beauty under the light, the beauty was like jade. Shun Miao could only be called a delicate and pretty beauty, but at this moment, even Shin Xiu could not help but look sideways. The young female's posture was quiet, but it seemed to contain a huge amount of energy. An exquisite heart had long hidden the chess game in her heart, and everyone had become a chess piece. Shin Xiu felt bitter in his heart. He had always felt that even though Shun Miao was not close to him, her temperament was extremely simple and one fear that she would be used by outsiders. But now he could see clearly that his younger sister had unknowingly grown up, and this kind of scheming was something that even he could not compare to. "Younger sister, I do not understand," she said. "If eldest brother believes in me, then leave the matter to me." Shun Miao said, "Prince Yu of the first rank, this kind of person would definitely find trouble with the Shun residents in the future because of this matter. We don't need this kind of enemy." Younger sister just said that Prince Yu of the first rank has the backing of the imperial family, so I cannot directly find trouble. "What will younger sister do?" Shin Xiu said worriedly. "I have said earlier that if the white road does not work, then take the black road. There are thousands of roads in the world, and there will always be one that works." Shin Miao lightly said, Prince Yu of the first rank relies on the imperial family to bully others and is just a turtle with a shell. Remove his shell and see how arrogant he can be." Under Shin Xiu's dumbstruck gaze, Shin Miao smiled gently at him. "But eldest brother, I need some money, so those things that His Majesty bestowed, give it to me with real gold and silver. I have use for it." Shin Xiu originally wanted to ask what Shin Miao wanted to do, but he did not know why. When he met Shin Miao's bright eyes, he could not say anything. He was the dignified Deputy General Shun and would occasionally argue with Shun Xan till his neck turned red, but as long as Shin Miao looked at him quietly, Shin Xiu felt that he would listen to everything unconditionally. Shin Xiu secretly spat at himself in his heart. He was not afraid of the enemy's generals, but afraid of a little girl. After living for so long, one would encounter all sorts of things. "Big brother?" Shin Xiu regained his senses and said, "All right, I will get someone to send some over." "Many thanks to eldest brother." Shin Miao nodded her head. "The sky is late. Eldest brother should also go and rest." "All right. There is no need to worry about the matter of Prince Yu residence. Do not tell father and mother. I will see to it." "All right." Shin Xiu scratched his head and left. When he was out of Shin Miao's room, he suddenly slapped his forehead and frowned. Damn it. There was really a feeling of being protected by one's own younger sister. In the room, Guyu carefully asked, "Young lady, is it really necessary to use so much money tomorrow?" Shin Miao's gaze froze. Guyu had not seen her own young lady with such a serious expression for a long time. Chapter 191. She sighed and said, "I'm afraid I can't take it down." On the second day, Shin Xiu really picked a few chests of real gold and silver and came to Shin Miao's courtyard. Most likely he was afraid that Shin Miao was short of money, so he took out 1,000 taels of banknotes from his bosom and gave it to Shin Miao before smiling. Younger sister's current age would require a lot of money, and one fear that this amount of monthly money is not enough. "Take these silvers. If there's anything you want to buy, just buy it. If it's not enough, just ask big brother for more." The maid sweeping the floor outside all looked at Shin Miao with envy. In the past, they felt that this fifth young lady of their family had an awkward position in the residence. She only had a good reputation and did not even know that she was being bullied. It was really pitiful. Now it seemed that they were blind. Not to mention Shin Xian and wife. Even Shin Xiu would pamper his younger sister to the skies. Shin Miao felt somewhat inexplicable as Shin Xiu's attitude was strange. She nodded her head and did not decline as she accepted the banknote. many thanks. Shin Xiu was a little disappointed. After thinking for a while, he waved his hand, and the two guards behind him immediately came forward. Shin Xiu said, "My two guards are experts in the army. I will temporarily lend them to protect you." He was worried that Prince Yu of the first rank would have some tricks up his sleeves. If it was not for Shin Miao's insistence to go out, Shin Xiu would have let Shin Miao stay in the residence. Shin Miao complied, and Mo Qing also followed out. Shin Xiu smiled. "Your choice of bodyguard is really not bad." Mo Qing had already left the identity of a guard outside the Shin residence, and Shin Miao told his identity to Shin Xiu. Shin Xiu returned the indenture to Mo Qing and let Mo Qing join the Shin family's army. But these days he would be Shin Miao's guard and protect her safety. Bringing along 3 guards and 2 maids, Shin Miao finally left the main entrance of the Shin residence. Even the carriage driver was someone that Shin Xiu found who had martial arts skills. Shin Xiu's servant said, "Young master is really protective of young lady." Shin Xiu sighed. It was a pity that no matter how much he tried to protect her, she was too mature as a younger sister and did not have the sense of accomplishment as an older brother. "Let's go." He waved his hand. "Let's go back and practice our swordsmanship." Fengxian Pawn Shop was the biggest pawn shop in the Ding capital. Compared to other pawn shops, this pawn shop naturally had its own advantages. The Fengxian Pawn Shop only accepted precious items. If it was an ordinary item, it would be courteously sent out by the pawn shop assistant. The owner of the pawn shop was probably a generous person. If the item that the customer offered was really valuable, then the pawn shop would definitely offer a high price. But the Fengxian Pawn Shop still had a rule. This place only did dead pawns. Once something was pawned, there was absolutely no reason to redeem it. However, people wouldn't pawn their precious things unless they were at the end of their rope, let alone pawn them at the cost of their lives. Thus, even though the Fengxian Pawn Shop was rich and overbearing and it occupied the largest area in the Ding capital, there were only a few customers coming and going. Under such circumstances, this Fengxian Pawn Shop actually maintained for many years and did not collapse. One did not know how they maintained their livelihood. Today, in front of this Fengxian Pawn Shop, there was a horse carriage stopped. Some of the commoners who were passing by could not help but look over. Because those who came to Fengxian Pawn Shop to pawn items, most of them were desperate and were in urgent need of money, and this carriage looked rather exquisite. The coachman sitting on the carriage also did not look like an ordinary person and did not look like a poor person. And why would a rich person come here to pawn their precious things? It was indeed somewhat strange. The pawn shop's worker was a young gray-clad boy who looked smart and capable. When he saw that the horse carriage stopped in front of the door, he was slightly surprised for a moment. Following that, a few females walked out from the inside. The leading young female was most likely a young lady from a family. She was wearing a cloak and had delicate features. When she looked over, her eyes were as clear as water. A few guards and maids surrounded that young female as they walked over. The little worker went up and smiled. "Customer wants to pawn something. There is something that needs to be pawned," that purple-clad young female said. "What item does this customer want to pawn? Can you take a look at the goods first?" The little worker smiled from ear to ear. He could see that this young female was either rich or noble, so his smile became more enthusiastic. Who knew that the other party shook her head. "I want to see your manager here. This is against the rules, customer." The little worker shook his head. He had seen a lot of people who came here to find trouble, and there was no lack of rich and powerful people, but the Fengxian Pawn Shop had never been afraid of these people. "The thing that I want to pawn is too big, and you look down on it." The young female was not angry and said lightly. When that pair of eyes looked at him, the little worker had a feeling that he had fallen into an ice cellar. Before he could speak, he heard a coquettish voice. "Who wants to see me?" A young female walked out from the back. This female was not considered beautiful, but her entire body exuded a charm that could captivate one's soul. The few guards behind Shin Miao all blushed. "This customer, do you want to see me?" That female swayed her waist as she walked over and asked with a smile. Shin Miao shook her head. "I want to see your manager, Bai Xiao Sheng." The female's smile stiffened in a split second. Chapter 192. Bai Shaoxing was not a person, but an industry. In one's life, there were thousands of positions. There was the imperial palace and also the common people of Jianghu. 36 professions and 72 professions. There was such a type of people who belonged to the 3 religions and 9 schools. It did not sound respectable, but there were many ways and uses. At times, the little bit of relationship between the imperial court and Jianghu was maintained by these people from the 3 religions and 9 schools. And Bai Shaoxing was one of these industries. As the name implied, Bai Shaoxing was somewhat similar to a detective. In hundreds of years of inheritance, this industry did not appear many times, and ordinary people would not have heard of it. As for where it was and what kind of people it was, no one knew. But not knowing did not mean that it did not exist. This Fengxian pawn shop in the Ding capital was the current Bai Shaoxing of Mingqi. That red-clad female's gaze gradually became solemn as she looked at Xun Miao, which made Mo Qing and the rest feel somewhat inexplicable. Even though they were in the army and had been in Jianghu, they really did not know what kind of thing Bai Shaoxing was. Naturally, no matter if it was Fengxian pawn shop or Bai Shaoxing, ordinary people would not know that the people who came here were all prepared. "Young lady is?" the red-clad female asked tentatively. "I am here to make a transaction." Hearing that, the red-clad female's expression slightly moved, and under the stunned gaze of the shop assistant, she smiled and said to Xun Miao, "This young lady's things must be expensive. Since that is the case, please follow me to the back for a discussion." Mo Qing and the rest also wanted to follow, but were stopped by the red-clad female. "These few people need not." "Young lady," Jingzhu was somewhat worried. If Xun Miao were to go in alone, perhaps she would meet with an accident. "You all stay," Xun Miao said. "I will return after this transaction is done." After Xun Miao and the red-clad female left, Mo Qing and the rest stayed in the outer hall. One of the guards that Xin Qiu gave to Xun Miao asked Mo Qing, "Brother Mo, what is young lady doing here?" After all he had killed and seen blood, he naturally had some intuition towards danger. That red-clad female's expression and the conversation between Xun Miao and Xun Miao made the few of them feel that this matter was not simple. "I also do not know." Mo Qing smiled bitterly and shook his head. Looking at the corridor that led inside, he said, "Young lady knows what to do." The red-clothed woman led Xun Miao through a very long corridor. At the end of the corridor was a square wooden pavilion. It had a total of 6 floors, and the top was covered with a veil. It was impossible to see what was inside, but it seemed to be very well maintained. At the very least, the wood used to make the pillars was the invaluable evening fragrant wood. There were rumors from outsiders that the Fengxian pawnshop's head was extremely wealthy, else the pawnshop business could only barely be maintained for so many years. After all, to buy such a large piece of land in the most prosperous area of the Ding capital, but to be unable to make ends meet, it was not something that everyone could afford. But Xun Miao knew that the reason why the Fengxian pawnshop was so rich and overbearing was naturally because the way they earned money was not through pawning things. What they did was a business that had no capital, and naturally it was profitable with little capital. The red-clothed female welcomed her to the lowest floor of the pavilion and found a room for her to sit down. It was a tea room, and the mahogany tables and chairs in the tea room were engraved with landscape paintings. The carvings were lifelike, and with one look, one would know that the craftsman's craftsmanship was exquisite, and of course the value was not cheap. "I am called Hong Ling," the female smiled. When she smiled, the corners of her eyes were so charming that water could drip out, as if the amorous feelings were carved into her bones. She asked, "How should young lady be addressed?" "My surname is Shun," Xun Miao said. When Xun Miao was sizing up the other party, Hong Ling was also sizing up Xun Miao. She was secretly surprised in her heart. Initially, she thought that it was some rich young lady that came to the Fengxian pawn shop to create trouble, but who knew that she actually heard Bai Shaoxing from the other party's mouth. Knowing that this was most likely an expert, she welcomed her inside. But Hong Ling had been doing business in the Fengxian pawn shop for so many years, but it was the first time that she met such a young customer. She was not sure how much the other party knew and feared that it was her first time doing business. so she was thinking if she should brush it off. Chapter 193. So it is Xin Young Lady. Hong Ling smiled. One do not know if Xin Young Lady came to our Feng Xian pawn shop to buy or sell. Xin Miao said, buy and also sell. Buying and selling at the same time, Hong Ling could not help but be surprised. It seemed that it was the first time that the few green-clad girls who were serving Hong Ling saw Hong Ling lose her composure and quietly glanced at Xin Miao. Putting away the shock in her heart, Hong Ling continued to smile. One do not know how much is the value of this transaction that Xin Young Lady is doing. Xin Miao shook her head. Hong Ling did not understand her meaning. Xin Young Lady. Xin Miao's voice was very calm. Just now I have already said that the business that I want to do is too big. He cannot see it, and you also cannot see it. If you want to talk, then look for your master. Hong Ling's throat was somewhat hoarse. For so many years, she had been good at dancing, but because the people who came here to do business all knew what Bai Xiaoxing's line of work was, they were polite and courteous to her. This was the first time that she was greeted so rudely. For a moment, she instinctively wanted to get angry, but when she raised her head and met with Shen Miao's gaze, she was slightly surprised. The young female opposite did not look old and had a pair of eyes that were as clear as water, but when she looked at people, there seemed to be a little bit of coldness that burst out. That calm and quiet appearance had an inexplicable majesty. Hong Ling felt that the other party's gaze towards her did not have a trace of fear, but was simply looking down from above. Hong Ling's heart quivered, and that little bit of anger disappeared in an instant. There were so many people coming and going doing business, and she was considered to be able to see people accurately. This young lady's imposing manner was a little shocking. She did not know where it came from, but it made her feel somewhat fearful. Xin Young Lady, I am the person in charge here. If there is a transaction to be done, naturally it will be done with me, she said. Even though she felt that Xin Miao's identity was not an ordinary person, Hong Ling was not one to be frightened, and the smile on her face became even more gorgeous. No matter how much money there is, it is not like I have not seen it before. It has nothing to do with money. Xin Miao smiled gently. I have said before that you cannot make the decision for this transaction. She looked around. I came with sincerity, but you all have no sincerity. Bai Xiaoxing is only SOSO. Hong Ling had never met such an impolite person before. Immediately, the smile on her face became colder as she said, I feel that Miss Shun does not seem to be sincere in doing business. Since Miss Shun does not believe me, there is nothing I can do. Xin Miao stared at her for a long while before saying, as such, I will first sell you a piece of news. Hong Ling paused, only to hear the girl in front of her say calmly, back then, the Chun sisters and Yuzhou of Jiangnan went missing. How about I sell this news to you? If you think the value of this information is good, please let the shopkeeper meet me, and then we can discuss the information. Hong Ling's body shook as she looked at her in shock. After a moment, she straightened her expression and said, May I trouble young Lady Shen to wait for a moment? Hong Ling will withdraw first. Hong Ling hurriedly left, leaving behind a few green-clothed girls in the tea room looking at her curiously. Clearly, they did not know why Hong Ling would suddenly leave after hearing her words. Xin Miao looked at the teacup in her hands. The tea was made from Junshan silver needles, and when it entered her mouth, the fragrance of the tea was rich. Coupled with the faint incense in the tea room, it made one feel relaxed and happy. Obviously, the owner of this place knew how to enjoy life. Bai Xiaoxing's business was in the pugilistic world's news. In the pugilistic world's news, it was divided into buying and selling news. There would be people who wanted to buy news, and there would be people who wanted to sell news. When the buyer and the seller met up, the business would be done. Bai Xiaoxing's business was like the intersection point of the beacons on the battlefield. What they did was to bring the buyer and the seller together. Chapter 194. And the news that Xin Miao wanted to sell was an unsolved case that caused a sensation in Mingqi. The wealthiest Qin family in Jiangnanzhou province had two beauties that could topple a city. With this kind of appearance, if they were to enter the palace, they would definitely be able to fight for a position as a concubine. Not to mention that the world's beauties were painted with skin. They were all white bones. True beauties were like the most exquisite jade, and one more glance was blasphemy. The Chen family was a big family, and it was not a good thing to have these two daughters. If a female's appearance was too outstanding and there was no ability to match their looks, one feared that it would bring disaster to the family. Fortunately, the Chen family was not only the wealthiest in Jiangnan, but also had a place in the pugilistic world. The Chen family had a wide network and had many friends in the underworld. The master of the Chen family was indebted to a sect head. Thus, the Chen family had a backing. Who knew that even so, when the Chen sisters were 16 years old, on the day of the Lantern Festival, they disappeared under everyone's eyes. The Chen family searched for a long time without any results. It had been 3 years since the Chen sisters disappeared. The Chen family had been spending manpower and financial resources to search for the two daughters. Even though they knew that the odds were against them, they had never given up. They even found Bai Xiaosheng and spent a lot of money to buy news. However, there was no news at all. Now that this business that had been in existence for 3 years suddenly had someone to sell, how could Hong Ling not be surprised? The remuneration that the Chen family paid was definitely not cheap. As long as Bai Xiaosheng could complete this business, even if it was divided, he would be able to get a lot of money. Business people speak according to money. Shen Miao did not believe that she could not find the master behind it. The pavilion in the Fengxian pawn shop was called Lin Jiangxian Pawn Shop, and the place to do business was on the first level. From the second to the 6th level, it was used by the head of the family. At this moment in the tea room on the 6th level, there were 3 people sitting at the table. Yushu, why did you arrive so quickly? Gao Yang frowned as he looked at the person opposite, did not even greet. Opposite him sat a 17 to 18 years old youth. This youth was very cute and was different from Xie Jingxing's burning hot sun-like handsomeness, and also different from Gao Yang's gentleness like water. This youth was like a neighbor's boy and had an inexplicable affinity. He was wearing a lake green robe, and his smile was rather pleasing. Heard that there is a change in the Ding Capital's plan, and knew that both of you would definitely need a capable general like me to help. So I specially came back to help. Gao Yang replied with a sneer. Ah, thank you, third brother? The youth called Yushu suddenly turned towards him and said, Yichui Lu's young lady Xiao Yao has recently been indifferent to me and is deeply frightened. Third older brother has always been liked by young lady. Why not teach me? This seemingly friendly and harmless young man was actually a veteran in the field of flowers. Xie Jingxing did not even look at him and said, Look at the appearance. Ah, could it be that third brother thinks that I'm not handsome? The youth was so angry that his face turned red. Back then I was also a flower, pursued by tens of thousands of people. Could it be that third brother is jealous of me? Gao Yang could not take it anymore, and pulled Ji Yushu's head to the other side. Ji Yushu, if you continue to speak like this, then go back. Cool. Yushu immediately sat up straight and said seriously, Third older brother, let us talk about the plan for this trip. He had not finished speaking when he saw a red-clad female coming up from downstairs. She had a charming appearance, but did not come in, and called out from afar through the curtains. Family head. Hong Ling, Yushu guided patiently. Told you many times that even though you are good-looking, it is better not to come up when us brothers are talking. Even though I dote on you, one cannot not know when to advance or retreat. He was born young and tender, as if he did not know the ways of the world, but the words he spoke was like a wily old fox. It was fortunate that Hong Ling was his subordinate, as if it was a normal young female that heard a few words from him. One feared that their face would turn red from embarrassment. Chapter 195. Master, it is a big business, and the guest insisted on seeing you. Hong Ling said. Yushu waved his hands. Which family's kid is so arrogant? My Fengxian pawn shop is not lacking in money. So, who would not need his business? Do not do it, then do not do it. Let him leave. There is no door for him to see this lord. But master, that business is not an ordinary one. Already said not to do it. Fengxian pawn shop does not serve those people. Yushu reached out to eat the snacks in front of him. Hong Ling was somewhat in a difficult position, but was helpless. Just as she was about to withdraw, she heard that purple-clad youth who had been thinking about something asked, "What business is it?" Hong Ling was startled and looked at Yushu. She knew that the relationship between the two people in front of her and the master was not shallow, but at the end this was a confidential matter, and if it was set out like this. Yushu saw her hesitant gaze and slapped his thigh. "Ask you to speak, then speak. These two are my own people and are also the shopkeepers of my Feng Xian pawn shop. Their words are my words, and in the future when I am not around, they will be the shopkeepers." Before he could finish speaking, Gao Yang let out another hee. When Hong Ling saw it, she was relieved and said with a smile, "One is here to sell news." The news to sell is about the case of the Chen sisters in Jiangnanzhou province 3 years ago. When her voice just landed, Gao Yang was the first to exclaim in surprise, "The Chen family's case. There is actually news after 3 years. This business is a little big." "Correct." Xie Jingxing also spoke. "The Chen family's influence in Jiangnan is vast. To accept this business, other than money, there are even more benefits. Talking about it, it must be done." Yushu scratched his head and said, "Since you all say so, then I will also go and take a look. I want to see which young fellow actually dared to make fun of this lord like this. It is very expensive for this lord to see one." Hong Ling could not help but laugh. "Not a young fellow. It is a young lady." "Young lady?" Yushu's expression changed, and suddenly he smiled happily. "Is she handsome?" "He's very handsome. I can tell that he's educated and reasonable." Yushu stood up with a swoosh and dusted his robes before cupping his hands towards Xie Jingxing and Hong Ling and said with a smile, "Two older brothers. This younger brother will take a leave first." Finishing, he turned his head towards Hong Ling and said anxiously, "Where is it?" "Let's go." "Hong Ling, why didn't you say so earlier?" After both of them left, Gao Yang then sighed and said to Xie Jingxing with a face full of disappointment, "I thought that there is no use for him to come to the Ding capital. You better let him go back." "It's good to be a target," Xie Jingxing said casually. Shen Miao sat in the tea room and looked down at the floating tea leaves in the teacup. The sound of footsteps came from the door. Then, the curtain was lifted and Hong Ling walked in. She bowed slightly respectfully and welcomed the person behind her in. Shen Miao raised her head. The person who came was a youth of 17 or 18 years of age and looked to have a rare naivety. He was wearing a lake green long robe embroidered with a deer pattern. One would say that one's temperament could be seen through one's clothes, and this youth's temperament was most likely cheerful. This seemed to be in line with his age, but Shen Miao's heart had some deep thoughts about the person in front of him. To be able to manage the Feng Xian pawn shop properly and also hold the lifeline of Bai Shaoxin's business in his hands, it was not to be underestimated. This youth was definitely as pure as he looked on the surface. This one is Ji Yushu. He sat opposite Shen Miao and smiled as he cupped his hands towards Shen Miao. "Manager Ji." "One do not know how old is Shen young lady?" He first threw out a completely unrelated question. Shen Miao was slightly surprised for a moment before replying. 14. "Oh, that is the prime of youth." He rubbed his hands, and there was a touch of enthusiasm in his eyes. "One do not know if there is a marriage partner? Are there any sisters in the family?" He had the appearance of a lecher who was teasing good young females. Chapter 196. Hong Ling's lips twitched and turned her head away, as if she did not want to see her master's roguish behavior. Shen Miao chuckled. "It seems that Manager Ji is not here to do business." Finishing, she gestured to leave. "AI!" Ji Yushu jumped in shock. "Speak properly. Shen young lady need not be anxious. Let's talk about business now." Shen Miao then stopped. Ji Yushu muttered softly, "Looks so gentle, but how can one be so fierce?" When he saw Shen Miao's sharp gaze, he immediately sat up straight and said, "Shen young lady want to sell the news of the Jiangnan's Chen family. Allow me to say one more sentence. 3 years ago, young lady was only 11. How do you know about this matter? In any case, it cannot be faked. The person who sells the news and the person who buys the news will eventually meet. Whether it is real or fake news, it is up to that side to decide. What is Manager Ji worried about? When the words were said, Hong Ling's and Ji Yushu's expressions paused at the same time, and the gaze that looked at Shin Miao was filled with deep meaning. Hearing Shin Miao's tone, it was as if she was very familiar with all the links, but Hong Ling and Ji Yushu were certain that Shin Miao had never been here before and was an unfamiliar guest. Even if it is so, but how did Shin Young Lady know about the Feng Xian pawnshop's business? Ji Yushu asked again. Heard of it by chance and came over to try. Shin Miao replied him with 8 words, and it could be said to be watertight, making Ji Yushu's fake, elegant smile to stiffen. Ji Yushu's eyes turned and suddenly changed the topic. Then how much does Shin Young Lady want to sell this news for? The person who bought the news would pay the money, a portion to the person who sold the news and a portion to Bai Xiaosheng. The amount of money needed to be discussed beforehand. After this, I still want to buy a piece of news. If Manager Ji can sell the news that I want to buy, I will not accept a single cent of the Jiangnan's province's Chun family's money, and will even give it to you. Ji Yushu sucked in a breath of cold air. To tell the truth, the Feng Xian pawn shop had been open for so many years, and many things were handed over to Hong Ling to manage, and he was just a shopkeeper who threw all the work to others. This was a profitable business, but it was also a very simple business. It relied on the connections and relationships of people from all walks of life. In terms of using one's brain, there were very few things that needed to be done. Who knew that after the conversation with Shan Miao today, he felt that the other party's words were full of twists and turns, making him somewhat overwhelmed. For example, at this moment, it was something that Ji Yushu could not understand. But he remembered that he was a businessman, so he asked, "What information does Mission want to buy?" From the looks of it, his background was not simple. If we can't find it, I'm afraid the money will be delayed for many years. I don't think it's a good idea. If Manager Ji is willing, there is no need for many years, and it can be done immediately. Shin Miao said, "What does this have to do with my willingness?" Ji Yushu's eyes widened. I am not the seller. The news that I want to buy is that Prince Yu Residence is plotting to rebel, but this news is not bought for myself, but for the Emperor's family of Mingqi. Does Manager Ji understand? Ji Yushu was first shocked by the words in her words and almost fell over as he looked at Shin Miao like he was looking at a lunatic. Hong Ling's eyes also widened as she looked at Shin Miao calmly saying such treacherous words and felt that her head was somewhat dizzy. The tea room was quiet for a long time until half of the incense was burnt before Ji Yushu said, "Hong Ling, bring them out." Hong Ling quickly brought the few girls out, and before leaving, she glanced at Shin Miao. The latter picked up the teacup, and her eyes were as calm as a pool of water. "Shin Young Lady," Ji Yushu said, "you are not buying information, but making information." Chapter 197. No one would directly tell the news to a middleman. Rather than saying that Shin Miao's transaction was for an outsider, it would be better to say that it was aimed at Bai Xiaosheng. She wanted to borrow the mouth of Bai Xiaosheng's business to spread some rumors and let these rumors accidentally spread to the imperial family. Bai Xiaosheng had a lot of connections in the depths of the marketplace, and they were all like slippery loaches. When the time comes to drill into the crowd, it would be completely clean and one would not be able to trace the source. Shin Miao was not afraid of spreading rumors to ordinary people, even if it was an official's family. But to involve the imperial family, one could not risk the Shin family. This was her plan. No matter if it is buying or selling information, riches and honor are sought in danger. Shin Miao smiled gently. Manager Ji does not dare to do this business? Ji Yushu scratched his head and said like a troubled youth, "I am naturally very tempted by Shin Young Lady's conditions, but Feng Xian Pawn Shop is not a decoration and is not a tool used to play games. If it is because of this one's greed that the Feng Xian Pawn Shop would be in trouble, it would be a disgrace to the ancestors." He put his palms together. Currently, Bai Xiaosheng's business is already rare, and for the ancestors, I cannot take the risk. Sorry, Shin Young Lady. He stood up and bowed to Shin Miao. Feng Xian Pawn Shop will not accept the news that Shin Young Lady wants to do. If the previous news that you want to sell does not change your mind, I will order people to note it down, and when the Jiangnan's Qin family has news, I will order people to inform young lady. As for where to inform, young lady can come to the pawn shop in 10 days. Finishing these words, Ji Shu smiled at her apologetically and turned to leave. Just as his footsteps were about to step out of the tea room, Shen Miao's voice came from behind. Manager Ji, there is not enough bargaining chips for the business. Add in the formidable great general's Shun family. Do it? Ji Shu was surprised for a moment and turned around. The purple-clothed girl lowered her head and looked at the teacup in front of her, as if she could see a flower in it. Her voice was calm, but it carried a kind of heavy tension, making the whole tea room seem abnormally cramped. If you are able to agree to do this business, the formidable great general residence in the Ding capital will henceforth become your by Shaoxing's network. Upstairs, Gao Yang and Xie Jingxing were still drinking tea when they suddenly heard a nervous voice. Older brothers, it is not good. When they looked up, it was Ji Shu who ran in recklessly. He lifted the bead curtain and sat in front of the table. He grabbed the blanket he had left behind, poured himself a full cup of tea, and gulped it down. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. You scared me to death. What's wrong with you? Gao Yang joked. Weren't you in a hurry to see the beauty just now? What? Isn't she pretty? Very, very beautiful. That's strange. Gao Yang rubbed his chin and thought for a while. Could it be that the beauty is very fierce and you made her angry? For a frivolous person like Ji Shu, everyone would shout and beat him up wherever he went. It was still better for the shy young females, but those who were slightly older would often ridicule him happily. More than very fierce, Ji Shu said with lingering fear, simply a monster. Cough. I've been doing by Shaoxing for so many years, but this is the first time I've seen such a business. Isn't it just a matter of the Chun family in Jiangnan? Could it be that she is asking for a lot of money? Gao Yang asked. More than asking for a lot of money. It is simply a bottomless pit. What exactly is it? Xie Jingxing glanced at him. If you still do not speak properly, I will throw you out from here. Cough. This customer does not need money to sell Jiangnan's Chun family's news and said that it is to be used to buy the news. Do you know what news she wants to buy? She wants to buy news for the imperial family, and the news is that Prince Yu residence is plotting to rebel. Damn it! Ji Shu could not help but scolded. This is using our Feng Xian pawn shop as a raft and want us to create news for her. When Gao Yang and Xie Jingxing heard it, their expressions gradually became serious. Ji Shu loved to play around and most likely did not know the severity of it, but both of them knew the danger in Ji Shu's words. This customer's methods were indeed too cruel. Ji Shu was still shouting unwillingly. Based on what? Based on what I do well in Feng Xian pawn shop, need to be a raft for others? In the future when something happens, she would slip away like a wisp of smoke, and the one to suffer would be my pawn shop. Do you think that I am stupid? Since that is the case, you just do not agree, Gao Yang said. Ha! Ji Shu suddenly changed his anger and laughed twice. To think that I know how to bargain and force her to loosen her mouth and offer a big price. Guess what is it? What? Xie Jingxing asked lazily. It is the Ding capital's mighty Wu great general Shun family. To complete this business, the Shun family is one of Bai Xiaoxing's connections. Seeing that I just returned and helped you all with such a big favor, quickly thank me. Ji Shu laughed wildly. Shun family? Xie Jingxing stared at him and slowly spoke. Who is the visitor? A young lady who looks rather good. Surname Shin, and most likely is also from the Shin family. Ji Shu scratched his head, just very fierce, and turned a blind eye to my elegance. Chapter 198. A young lady who looks rather good. Surname Shin, and most likely is also from the Shin family. Ji Shu scratched his head, just very fierce, and turned a blind eye to my elegance. When the words were spoken, the tea room fell into a strange silence. After a moment, Gao Yang then looked at Xie Jingxing with a smile. I roughly know who it is. This Shin family's young lady is somewhat powerful. Even though the smile was gentle, there was some sharpness in the tone. Actually, I also find it strange. Ji Shu shuddered and scratched his head. Just now when she came over, I took a careful look. It was not like it was the first time she came to buy Xiao Pao to do business. I asked Hong Ling and had never seen her before. Our business is secretive, and other than those few families of officials in the Ding capital, no one else knows about it. How did she know? This young lady is not simple. Gao Yang pondered. I originally thought that the Ding capital Xin family was brainless fat meat that would be swallowed by others sooner or later. Now it seems that the water is deeper than imagined. He swept a glance at Xie Jingxing and found that the latter was deep in thought. What do you think? Xie Jingxing raised his head and looked at Ji Shu. Did you agree to her conditions? Such a big matter. I need to discuss it with you all. Ji Shu ate a pastry in one mouthful. But I estimate that the Shun family has a large business and the military strength in their hands is not weak. If what that young lady of the Shun family said is true, in the future, it would be much easier for third older brother to plan. After all, she does not know that our Feng Xian pawn shop is privately third older brother's business. When the sandpiper and clam fight, the fisherman benefits. That young lady surnamed Shin most likely did not know that the promise that she made would ultimately benefit Xie Jingxing. However, one could not blame her, as even Hong Ling, who had been the steward of the Feng Xian pawn shop for many years, did not know about the powerful relationship involved. Be that as it may, Gao Yang muttered to himself, this gamble is a little too big. The news that she wants to create would attract the imperial family's attention. We must be careful in our actions, as it would not be worth the loss if there were any mistakes. As for the Shin family or the Shun family, the initial plan did not have the Shun family's power, so there is no need to be so concerned. What you said is also reasonable. Ji Shu nodded his head and looked at Xie Jingxing. But in the end, it is still third older brother who makes the decision. You agreed to her conditions. When Xie Jingxing spoke, Gao Yang frowned. Why are you making such a hasty decision? Since the Shin family has become a variable, it does not mean that they will not be useful in the future. It could be used to deal with some people. As for the news that she wants to create, it is directed at Prince Yu residence. Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows. Just nice. We do not need to take action to tidy up, and it would save us trouble. Hearing his words, the others finally remembered. Ji Shu clapped his hands. That's right. I almost forgot. She wanted to spread the news of Prince Yu residence rebelling. This is directed at Prince Yu residence. Is there enmity between Prince Yu residence and the Shin family? Ji Shu had just returned to the Ding capital and usually did not pay attention to the affairs between the young ladies of official families. Thus he was not clear about all these and was somewhat inexplicable. Gao Yang's heart was clear. He knew of the grudges between Xin Miao and Prince Yu and could not help but cast a sidelong glance. If it was an ordinary female who encountered such a matter, they would be afraid of the power of Prince Yu residence, but not only was Xun Miao not afraid, she was even waiting for an opportunity to counterattack. She was very smart. Since Prince Yu residence had the support of the imperial family, she would first alienate the imperial family. If the imperial family had doubts about Prince Yu, naturally the life-saving talisman behind Prince Yu residence would not be of any use. But even so, what else could she do? Accept this business, Xie Jingxing said. Quickly inform the Jiangnan's Chun family. Chapter 199. Don't worry, I've already asked Hong Ling to send a letter to Yuzhou. The Chun family's case has been delayed for 3 years, but I don't know if the news about the young lady from the Shin family is true or false. After all, back then, the Chun family had tried everything they could to no avail. So how could a little girl know about it? If her news is false, one estimate that the Chin family would not let her have a good time. Ji Shu said vaguely with his mouth stuffed with snacks. Since she came to sell the news, it must be true. Xie Jingxing frowned. But there is still something wrong with this matter. Are you a good-for-nothing? Gao Yang looked at Ji Shu wolfing down his food and could not help but shake his head. Could it be that you, a shopkeeper of Feng Xian pawn shop, have never eaten your fill? Ji Shu stretched out a finger and shook it. How would the dim sum of other places be as good as third older brother's chef? Last time, I brought third brother chef's desserts to Lady Xiao Yao, and Lady Xiao Yao actually smiled at me. It can be seen that He picked up a piece of dessert and waved it in front of Gao Yang. "There's something different about you." Gao Yang was too lazy to talk to him. But suddenly he saw Ji Yushu's expression congealed as he thought of something and took out a banknote from his bosom. "Speaking of which, that Shin family's young lady finally gave me 1,000 silver to buy a piece of news." "What news?" Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang looked at him at the same time. "Said to look for a person, a young lady called Luing. Said to be, most likely a young lady from a brothel, and is in the Ding capital, so that I must find her." He asked curiously, "Why is she looking for a young lady from a brothel? Could it be that you also like beauties like me?" Gao Yang and Xie Jingxing looked at each other. The former was puzzled, and the latter only shook his head slightly. When she was sent out by Hong Ling, Mo Qing and the rest then heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that she was safe and sound. Shen Miao had stayed inside for too long, and if she had stayed a moment longer, one feared that the few of them would have rushed in to snatch her away. Before Shen Xiu left, he exhorted over and over again that Shen Miao had gotten into trouble and must be careful on the road. If he really lost Shen Miao, Shen Xiu would turn around and kill a few people. Hong Ling politely smiled at Shen Miao. "Shen young lady can come back here 10 days later." "Thank you, Manager Hong," Shen Miao replied softly. It was the little shop assistant at the door who could not help but take a few more glances at Shen Miao. It was probably the first time that he saw Hong Ling being so respectful to someone. After Shen Miao and entourage boarded the horse carriage and left, the shop assistant could not help but ask Hong Ling, "Steward, what is the background of that young lady?" "Mind your own business." Hong Ling lightly patted his head and thought for a moment before saying, "Next time you see this Shun young lady, speak sweetly. That is not a simple person." The waiter hurriedly agreed. Hong Ling looked at the departing figure of the carriage and sighed inwardly. There were indeed many talented people in the Ding capital, and now even a young lady could quietly plan such a big matter. Compared to the head of one's own family, she did not seem to lose out much. In the carriage, Shen Miao was in deep thoughts, and one did not know what she was thinking about. Jingzhe and Guyu were afraid of disturbing her thoughts and did not speak at all. Actually, they did not know what business Shen Miao was doing today. It was obviously a pawn shop, but they did not know what was being pawned. But since Shen Miao did not say anything, the two maids would not talk about it. But when they passed by a place, Guyu smiled. In front is Guang Fu Zhai. "One have not gone out for a long time. Why not let this servant go and buy some Guang Fu Zhai snacks?" Guang Fu Zhai snacks had always been in high demand, and now that it was not the most crowded time, there was no harm in buying some. Even though Shen Miao did not like to eat, Luo Shui Yin and Shen Xiu liked to eat. Shen Miao nodded her head. "You go." Chapter 200. Guyu then jumped down the carriage and went to Guang Fu Zhai first. Mo Qing and the rest surrounded the carriage. The few of them were tall and strong and were somewhat eye-catching. In a moment, everyone who passed by would take a few glances. Shen Miao opened the curtain to get some fresh air, but her eyes were attracted by one person. That person most likely just came out from Guang Fu Zhai as he was carrying a bag of snacks in his hands. Coincidentally, his eyes met with Shen Miao in the air and could not help but be slightly startled. It was Pei Lang. Shen Miao had not been to Guangwentang for a long time. She did not want to gain the reputation of a talented female and also did not want to use this to obtain scholarly honors. These days she was busy with her own matters and had forgotten about this. She looked at Pei Lang and suddenly smiled and nodded her head at him in the carriage. Pei Lang was somewhat stunned for a moment. In fact, Shen Miao was his student. Ming Qi still valued the character of respecting one's teacher. Xie Jingxing was out of line, but as long as one was a student, one would always be polite to one's teacher. But Shen Miao's nod just now gave Pei Lang an illusion that he had to look up to Shen Miao, and Shen Miao was a head taller than him. Without waiting for him to react, Shen Miao had already put down the curtain. Mo Qing and the rest who were in the carriage noticed his gaze and looked at him with some vigilance. Pei Lang stood rooted to the ground. Such a rude action would have enraged a person like him, who was innately arrogant to the bone. But he did not know why, other than not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He could not feel any other emotions. Most likely it was because of Shin Miao's strong performance these days that he felt that if Shin Miao behaved like those students and acted obediently, he would not be used to it. Shaking his head, Pei Lang could only leave. Feeling that the gaze outside the carriage had left, Shin Miao's eyes looked down at her sleeves. Towards Pei Lang, her feelings were very complicated. She knew that Pei Lang was indifferent towards the matter of Fu Xiu treating Wan Yu and Fu Mingji, but she also knew that Pei Lang was only a person who was loyal to the ruler. The grudges from the previous lifetime had been settled, and since there was still a need for Pei Lang in this lifetime, she should not be entangled in this matter. It was just that her heart was somewhat uncomfortable. Just as she was thinking, Guyu had already returned from buying snacks. By the time they returned to the Shin residence, it was still not late, and Shin Xiu was also staying in the western courtyard. Shin Miao planned to send some snacks to Shin Xiu. Just as they walked to the main hall, they coincidentally met Run Wan Yun supporting Shin Qing out. Run Wan Yun's gaze toward Shin Miao was like a knife, and Shin Qing's eyes were incomparably venomous. Even Gu Yu and Jing could not help but shiver, and both of them protected Shin Miao behind them. Fifth Lady had not gone to greet Old Foreign these days. Run Wan Yin brought up another topic. Could it be that she plans to be an unfilial descendant? Shin Miao swept a glance at her. Ren Wan Yin was now like a mad dog, biting whoever she caught. On one side, she was afraid of Shin Xian and Luo Shuiyin, but at the same time she was not willing to let Shin Qingbai suffer for nothing, so she could only do some small actions that did not hurt or itch. However, Shin Miao was after all not someone who was scared. She was not afraid of reputation at all. She looked at Shin Qing with a slight smile. Second Shin still has the energy to manage my matters, so she is not afraid of eldest sister's heart being hurt. The Empress's bestowal of marriage came in a rush, as she will be entering the Wang residence next month. Second Shun has to teach eldest sister some things. After all, the marriage is not from an ordinary family, but the residence of a prince of first rank. Finishing, she did not even turn her head back as she brought Jingzhe and Guyu away. Ren Wan Yun was so angry that her entire body was trembling. These days, the angrier she was, the more she felt that her mind was in a mess. She did not even have the time to bother about that Wan Yinyang that Shun Gui doted on. Wan Yinyang gave birth to Shin Dongling, who was delicate and helpless in the past, and would often cook for Shin Gui to eat. With Shun Qing as a foil, she became more well-behaved. With that Wan Yinyang coaxing Shin Gui until he was docile, Ren Wan Yun and Shin Qing were getting worse by the day. Chapter 201. And all of this was because of Shun Miao. Otherwise, with Ren Wan Yun's methods, how would Wan Yinyang, who was previously subdued by her, be so arrogant today? Mother, Shin Qing, who was by the side, pulled her hand. These days she had suffered a lot of cold eyes, and her previous arrogant and impetuous temperament had converged a lot. The hatred in her eyes did not diminish as she gritted her teeth. Do not worry, endure it. Wait till I enter the residence of the prince of first rank. Even if I have to risk this life, I will let Prince Yu take action against Shin Miao. I will definitely not let her live well. Because Shin Qing was already pregnant, the Empress's bestowal of marriage was set for next month, so that it would not be easy to clean up after a long time. In such a short period of time, and it was an imperial edict, Ren Wan Yin really could not do anything and could only watch as Shan Qing jump into the fire pit. Qinger need not be afraid. Ren Wan Yin said, your older brother will be back soon. Yuan is the smartest, and when he returns, he would definitely think of ways to let that little slut's reputation be ruined. Shin Yuan would also rush back to participate in Shun Qing's marriage. Ren Wan Yun's eyes flashed. Now she was isolated and helpless, and if it was not for Shun Yuan Bo, who followed her words to please Old Foreign, that old woman would not help her. Shin Miao returned to the western courtyard, and unexpectedly saw Shin Xiu waiting for her in the courtyard. Seeing her return, Shin Xiu then gave a sigh of relief and looked at her up and down. Why were you gone for so long? One thought that something happened. Under the sun of heaven's feet in broad daylight, one would be a fool if one were to make a move. Shin Miao handed the snacks to him. Bought it when I returned. This is for you. Xin Xiu was surprised for a moment and was somewhat touched as he received it. After returning this time, Xun Miao's change in attitude towards him made him pleasantly surprised. "Why are father and mother not around?" Xun Miao asked. "Just returned to the capital and socialized with colleagues." Xin Xiu looked around and said, "Younger sister, you are not around today, and these few days father had some conflicts with second and third Shu. Just now, old foreign reprimanded father severely." Father had a conflict with second and third Shu? Xin Xiu looked at Xin Miao's expression and thought about it before saying, "Younger sister, you also know that because of the matter in the ancestral hall, father and mother were somewhat dissatisfied with second and third Shu. Naturally, he didn't pay attention to them. Old madam was probably anxious, so she reprimanded father." Speaking till here, Xin Xiu's face could not help but reveal a look of injustice. Old foreign's heart is too biased. What wrong did father do? Second uncle and third uncle did not take good care of you in the Fu. Even I am angry, not to mention father. Xin Xiu did not call her grandmother, but old foreign. It was obvious that he had some complaints about old Xin foreign. After saying this, Xin Xiu could not help but look at Xin Miao's expression. Xin Miao was after all raised up by old Xin foreign, and every time she returned, she would be very respectful to old Xin foreign. Xin Xiu said these words impulsively, as he was not sure if Xin Miao would be disgusted or not. There is a difference in closeness, and after all, it is not one's own blood that flows. Xin Miao said indifferently, "Naturally, there will be favoritism." Huh. Xin Xiu seemed to be happy that he had found an ally. "That's right. Father is filial to her because of grandfather. You have done enough for so many years. You actually scolded father for being unfilial. Scolding father is not only because of second and third Shu's matters." Xin Miao said, "One fear that this time father did not hand over the money that His Majesty bestowed." Old Xin foreign loved money like her life, and this time Xin Xian kept the reward for himself due to his anger. In addition, Xin Miao also did not mention to send the money over. After a long time, old Xin foreign naturally could not sit still and thicken her face to find fault. "This is really..." Xin Xiu seemed to want to say something, but felt that it was not good to say it in front of his younger sister, and endured it. "So what about it? Father's things can be given to whoever one wants to." Chapter 202. That's right, so let her scold as she pleases. As long as one's face is acceptable and ignore her, she would not be able to play any tricks. It is just that father's temperament is too straightforward, and some matters must be tolerated on the surface. When the time comes, there will naturally be a chance to vent. Xin Xiu felt that Xin Miao's words were somewhat strange, but faintly felt something. He smiled, not seeing for a year. Younger sister's temperament has become much stronger. Xin Miao declined to comment. Seeing that Xin Xiu had already opened the paper bag, he picked up a large piece of dim sum and threw it into his mouth. After chewing a few times, she said, "The dim sum in the Ding capital is just delicious. We are in the Northwest Desert, so how would there be such exquisite things?" Xin Miao quietly watched him eat, and after a moment, she softly asked, "What does eldest brother think of loyalty?" "Loyalty?" Xin Xiu did not even raise his head. Naturally, it is to be loyal to the monarch and serve the country, to kill the foreign enemies with iron blood, to be a pillar of the country. Finishing, he then asked Xin Miao, "Why does younger sister ask this?" "Nothing." Xin Miao shook her head and softly said, "You eat." In the depths of her eyes, there was a flash of sadness. The first snow had cleared up, and it had been snowing for the entire night in the Ding capital. When the sunlight shone in, the ice crystals under the eaves shone brightly, making it look very beautiful. There were naughty children on the streets who squatted down to grab a handful of snow and made a snowball before throwing it at each other to play. The nearer it was to the end of the year, the livelier the Ding capital became. It was as if all the hard work throughout the year was at the end of the year, bearing rich fruits. On the eaves of the Feng Xian pawn shop, there was a row of neatly hung red lanterns, but it was not an ordinary red lantern. One did not know what material was used to make the lanterns, but it seemed to be mixed with golden yarn. It was actually sparkling under the sunlight, and the pendant at the bottom of the lantern was also a sparkling glass bead that sparkled beautifully with the ice crystals. Only those who were rich and overbearing would do such a thing. There were guards guarding outside, otherwise, there would be an endless stream of people coming to steal the lanterns. The little shop assistant in plain clothes welcomed the guests with a face full of smiles. There were usually very few people who came to Feng Xian Pawn Shop to do business, and the shop assistants usually loved to goof off, but today he was unusually energetic, as if he was sure that there would be guests coming. Behind the long corridor of the Feng Xian Pawn Shop, in another world, on the first floor of the Marquis of Linen, in the tea room, the red-clad female had a charming smile as she personally carried the refreshments in and delivered it to the inside before saying with a smile, "The chef made the refreshments. Everyone please have a taste." As she spoke, she leisurely retreated. There were 3 people sitting in the tea room. One of them was wearing a light green robe, and his smile was warm and friendly. The 2 people in front of him seemed to be in their 20s, and they looked very similar. Obviously, they were a pair of brothers. Both of them had thick eyebrows and big eyes, with swords hanging from their waists, giving them the air of Jianghu. At this moment, the older of the 2 brothers said, "Shopkeeper Ji, could it be that the person who bought the information is plotting against us? Why hasn't he appeared yet?" Ji Yushu smiled. "Brother Chun need not be anxious. That day I had an agreement with her that we would meet here today, but did not mention the time. Anyhow, it will be today, and it will not be too late. Hope that both of you will be more tolerant." Finishing, he cursed the 2 people in front of him in his heart, who had come to do business so early in the morning when the sky had just brightened. He was still blinded, and if it was not because of the Jiangnan's Chun family's face, he would have directly sent them away. To be honest, the eldest Chun young master Chun Yushan said, "When us 2 brothers received the news, it should have taken more than half a month to reach the Ding capital, but we rushed on without stopping, and a few horses died from exhaustion." It was nothing more than news of the 2 younger sisters. Shopkeeper Ji also know that in these 3 years, we have spent a lot of energy to find the younger sisters, but there was no news at all. Now that there are finally some signs, naturally we are anxious. One hope that Shopkeeper Ji will not laugh at us. This eldest Chun young master could speak well, and most likely he saw that Ji Yushu was somewhat unhappy with the 2 of them coming too early, so he half explained and half apologized. Chapter 203. Ji Yushu's heart felt more comfortable, and his smile became more sincere as he smiled. "These few years I have been helping you all to pay attention to the news, and now that there is some progress, my heart is also very comforted. It is actually nothing much for us to wait for him here." Second Chun young master Chen Yuhai was younger and spoke with more youthful vigor. "As long as the news is true, what harm is there in waiting for half a month? But if it is false, to play tricks on our Jiangnan's Chen family like this, do not blame us brothers for being impolite." Ji Yushu's heart that had just calmed down suddenly became unhappy again. He did not care if the Chen brothers were to be unreasonable, but to be unreasonable in his territory. It really made him extremely unhappy. His smile did not change, but his tone became colder. "My Feng Xian pawn shop only deals with the buying and selling of news. If this business is successful, then it is the matter of exchanging money, but if it is not successful, then we will part ways. I do not care what Brother Chen wants to do, but my Feng Xian pawn shop is a clean place to do business and cannot afford trouble." Chen Yushan paused and glared fiercely at his younger brother. He naturally knew that this seemingly friendly and harmless youth's means were powerful and would not be as simple as what he showed at the moment. Chen Yuhai saw his older brother's expression and knew that he had said the wrong words, so he did not continue for a moment. The atmosphere became silent. After a long while, there were footsteps at the door, and it was Hong Ling who came forward with a smile to open the beaded curtain and said to Ji Yushu, "Manager, a guest is here." The Chen brothers subconsciously looked towards the door and saw a purple-clad young female walking out from behind Hong Ling. This young female looked delicate and cute and looked to be around 13 or 14 years of age. One did not know why, but her brows were as calm as water, and she seemed to be much older. For a moment, it made one somewhat confused. She opened the curtain and sat down on the empty chair before nodding her head to Ji Yushu, Manager Ji. This young lady. Chun Yushan opened his mouth with difficulty and asked, "Is the person who sells the news?" Hong Ling smiled and retreated, leaving only the Chin brothers, Shun Miao and Ji Yushu in the tea room. Shun Miao said, "Correct." Chen Yuhai's expression changed and said with a sneer, "Young lady, how old were you 3 years ago? Could it be that you were deliberately playing with the both of us? There are many ways to get the news. Maybe I didn't see it with my own eyes, or maybe I didn't know about it 3 years ago. Doing business is all about results. Moreover, a Mirchin family really isn't worth playing with." With a pu sound, Ji Shu could not help but laugh out. Just as he laughed, he saw Qin Yuhai's ugly expression and quickly said seriously, "Xin young lady is right. Doing business is about the result, and as for the process, it is not important." "Really?" Qin Yuhai looked at Xin Miao and said in a lukewarm tone, "One do not know if the Xin young lady can guarantee that the news is true. It's true that doing business requires results, so if the results are true, we brothers will naturally reward you handsomely. But if it doesn't work, do you know what the consequences will be?" As he finished speaking, Qin Yuhai's tone suddenly became gloomy. Those who roamed the Jianghu were all somewhat fierce. The ferocity that erupted in that instant was enough to frighten ordinary people, at least enough to frighten a little girl. In the silence, Xin Miao stared at him without blinking, and there was not a trace of fluctuation in her expression. Her calm appearance made Qin Yuhai seem like an unreasonable person. Ji Yushu wanted to laugh, but could not, and could only hold it in. Qin Yushan, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Xin young lady, my younger brother is somewhat impetuous. I apologize on his behalf. Both of us are sincerely here to buy this news, and if young lady's news is true, we will definitely offer 10,000 gold as thanks." "There is no need for 10,000 gold," Xin Miao said. "It is just that the Chun family of Jiangnan has many connections, and I only want to form good karma. Perhaps in the future there will be difficulties, and if there is anything that requires the Chun family's help, one hope that both of you can take care of me on the account of this news." She was facing two males who were much older and more knowledgeable than her, but her words were not at a disadvantage. She was methodical and had some Jianghu heroism, which made Qin Yushan look at her more highly and cupped his hands in acknowledgement. But one did not know that Ji Yushu had already scolded Xin Miao as a profiteer in his heart. One had to know that the money from the sale of this news would all be given to the Fengxian pawn shop, but Xin Miao took the initiative to say that she would give less money. Was this not changing the method to let the Fengxian pawn shop earn less? "You better talk about that news." Qin Yuhai was somewhat anxious. Xin Miao glanced at him and said, "The Chen family sisters went missing in Jiangnanzhou province. In fact, they were abducted, and the mastermind who abducted the two sisters was His Majesty's twin brother, Prince Yu of the first rank." When the words were spoken, the three people in the tea room were silent. In another secret room that was next to the tea room, the two people in the room were also startled. The white-clad gentleman even cried out involuntarily, "Prince Yu of the first rank?" The purple-clad youth rubbed the jade cup in his hands and suddenly smiled before speaking word by word. "Interesting." Chapter 204. In the tea room, Ji Yushu's heart had a moment of enlightenment. Previously, Xin Miao said that she wanted to create news, but the news was targeted at Prince Yu residence. At this moment, the news that was sold to the Chun family was also related to Prince Yu residence. Wasn't it to incur hatred for Prince Yu residence? It seemed that what Gao Yang said was indeed correct. The Shen family and Prince Yu residence had a deep hatred, and this person set up a trap with Prince Yu residence, waiting for Prince Yu residence to stumble. But thinking about it, Ji Yushu was somewhat depressed. Those who came to Bai Shaosheng to do business had always been sincere in buying and selling information, and were deeply grateful to this place that could provide information. How would it be like Xin Miao in front of him, who directly used Bai Shaosheng as a tool, using Bai Shaosheng to rope in the Qin family, and use Bai Shaosheng to deal with Prince Yu residence? But Ji Yushu pondered in his heart. Even if the Chun family of Jiangnan was a big family, Prince Yu residence had a fierce reputation for so many years, and there was also the imperial family's protection. Unless it was a blood feud, who would rush in upon seeing danger? Is what Xin young lady said the truth? Chun Yushan's voice was hoarse. Prince Yu's ferocious and lascivious reputation was known by the entire court, and if the Chun sisters were to fall into his hands, one could imagine the outcome. I have no need to lie to you, but how can you prove that what you said is true? Chun Yu Hai suddenly shouted out agitatedly. Most likely it was because he could not believe it after hearing the news, or because he did not dare to believe it. He was especially fierce towards Xin Miao. The Chun sisters are a pair of beauties, but were protected by the Chun family impenetrably. Prince Yu had always loved excitement and spent a lot of effort to kidnap the Chun sisters. Afterwards, they were brought to the Ding capital overnight, and when the Chun family was still searching for the sisters' whereabouts in Yu province, the Chun sisters had already reached Prince Yu residence. Speaking till here, Xin Miao's voice paused for a moment before continuing. Afterwards, Prince Yu's methods of torturing females were terrible, and the Chun sisters wanted to commit suicide, but were stopped by Prince Yu. Afterwards, the older sister flattered and hoped to let the younger sister escape, but in fact Prince Yu knew of their plans and pretended not to know. After that, the older sister was bestowed to Prince Yu's subordinates and was tortured and beaten to death. The younger sister was humiliated on the way and was blinded and found a place to do night incense work, always hoping to survive because this was the life that the older sister had fought for. It is just that, Shun Miao sighed softly. She actually never walked out of the doors of Prince Yu residence. The so-called night-scented work and the surrounding neighbors were all arranged by Prince Yu in order to play with the Chun family's younger sister and see her living in the swamp with hope. Her voice was calm and cool, with only a hint of regret at the end, but it sent chills down one's spine. Ji Shu was also extremely shocked. Even though he knew of Prince Yu's absurd and terrifying methods of torturing females, it was the first time he heard someone talk about it in such detail. It was to say it, but it was easy to kill. Li Yang. You. As for that Chun sister, she thought that she had escaped and was living with hope, hoping that one day she would be able to take revenge and find her family. But she did not know that the hope was already in someone's hands, and everything she did was just a playful method in Prince Yu's eyes. Such words made the Chun brothers silent. Chun Yu Hai slowly stretched out his hand and clutched his head and suddenly howled in pain. His voice was like a wounded beast, making one to cry. Ji Yushu could not help but cast a sympathetic look. Xin Miao looked at him and sighed in her heart. The first half of the Chun sisters' lives were also the pearls in the palm of one's hands, living a carefree life, and could have become the happiest female in the world. But the lower half of the body was so miserable and was worse than an ordinary female. It was a sin to be too beautiful, but what crime did the Chun sisters commit? Xin young lady. Qin Yushan was more steady than Qin Yu Hai, but even so, his voice was trembling. How to prove that what Xin young lady said is the truth? All these are after all Xin young lady's side of the story. No matter how steady a person was, when they heard news that they were not willing to believe, they would most likely be like Chun Yushan and keep escaping, thinking that they would not have to face it. Chapter 205. Very simple. The Chun family's younger sister is still alive, and Prince Yu residence has an impenetrable defense. If you rashly go in like this, one fear that you will beat the grass and alert the snake. If you want to know if my words are true, you can go to Prince Yu residence and kidnap one of the purchasing servants and ask if there is a female that sells night incense in his residence. You will know after asking your own younger sister. As soon as he said this, the two Chin brothers swayed, unable to conceal the pain on their faces. Ji Yushu sighed in his heart. Xin Miao spoke in such detail and with such certainty. This news was most likely true. You? Qin Yu Hai stared at Xin Miao and suddenly said, "Since you know about this matter, why did you not save her? You watched helplessly as she fell into the pit of fire, yet you refused to help her. Instead, you calmly came here to trade information. You." He slammed the table. "You're so heartless." "Yu Hai." Qin Yushan reprimanded him in a low voice and cupped his fist toward Xin Miao, Sorry, Shin Young Lady. My second younger brother is too sad, and hope that Shin Young Lady does not mind. Even though his words were polite, the trace of complaint in his eyes towards Shin Miao was seen by Shin Miao. After a moment of silence, Shin Miao did not get angry, but instead laughed and looked at Shin Yuhai. How does Gentleman Shin think I should help? I'm just a defenseless girl. What ability do I have to save her from the fiery pit? Would she disregard her own safety and sneak into the prince's residence? Or would she give up her life to fight for an opportunity like her sister? Today, I will say that if that person is my biological sister, I can save her. But to me, she is just a stranger. Dare I ask, young Master Chen, would you risk your life for a stranger? If you dare, I will respect you as a man. It's a pity that I'm such a cowardly and narrow-minded woman. Why should I be a good person? Her words were said so quickly and anxiously that the Chun brothers were actually rendered speechless by her, and Jiu Shu's mouth was wide open. He did not know why, but he felt that Shin Miao was suddenly angry just now. Shin Miao's words were also full of sarcasm. That's right. If the world was filled with good people who were willing to risk their lives for strangers, then the world would not be so difficult. Shin Miao was just a little female, so what ability did she have to help the Qin sisters to escape? Shin Miao coldly looked at the two brothers opposite her. Just now her emotions were somewhat out of control. It was just that now what she hated the most was other people using righteousness to threaten her. In the beginning, for the common people of Mingqi and for Fu Xiu Yi, she volunteered to be a hostage in the Qin country, and when she returned to the palace, what awaited her was the indifference of the emperor. Her Shun family, for the righteousness of the country, assisted the emperor, and what she received was the execution of the entire family. Why did they have to pay for everything? Why did she have to be the savior? The Qin sisters were indeed very pitiful. When she was banished to the cold palace and had nowhere to go, she was also pitiful when she couldn't even protect her children. But who reached out to help her? In this world, no matter how difficult life was, one had to walk on their own. No one should save others. Shin Yuhai was silent for a long time before speaking to Shin Miao. Just now my words were too heavy. Shin Young Lady, I am sorry. Shin Miao calmed down her emotions and said, My news ends here. We two brothers believe Miss Shin's words. Chen Yushan said, But the most urgent matter is to first investigate the whereabouts of my younger sister. If my younger sister is found, the Qin family will definitely reward with 10,000 gold. I have already said before that there is no need for 10,000 gold and only need to form good karma. Shin Miao said, But I have a sentence that I do not know if both of you are willing to hear. One would like to hear the details. Chen Yushan cupped his hands. Prince Yu of the first rank haggles over every penny and is narrow-minded. If anyone provokes him, he would definitely retaliate. The Qin family has a big business, but when compared to the imperial family, they're still a head shorter. One think that both of you not only want to rescue the Qin sisters, but also want to take revenge for the Qin sisters. Chapter 206. The two brothers looked at each other, and Qin Yuhai did not hide it. The blood feud is absolutely irreconcilable. Our Qin family and the residents of the Prince of First Rank are irreconcilable, and this blood debt must be repaid. Even if you do not reclaim this debt, Prince Yu of the First Rank will definitely know that it was your Chun family who did it. So no matter what, you will go against the residents of the Prince of First Rank. I think that one must remove the roots when cutting the weeds. If one want to have no worries in the future, one must capture the entire residents of the Prince of First Rank in one fell swoop. Shin Young Lady's meaning is? Chun Yushan asked hesitantly. The sex in the pugilistic world have a wide range of connections, and all heroes are friends. Even though the residence of Prince Yu is noble, but in terms of strength, it is not difficult to exterminate the entire family. Exterminate the entire family. Jiu Shu was idly listening at the side, but when he heard to this point, he could not help but spurt out a mouthful of tea. The gaze that he looked at Shin Miao was one of astonishment. It was somewhat terrifying for a young lady to say the words exterminate the entire family with a calm expression. The Qin brothers were also startled. Chen Yushan sized up Shin Miao opposite, and a chill rose in his heart. He had seen many vicious and merciless people in the pugilistic world, but this young lady in front of him could be said to be one of the best. With one sentence, she did not leave anyone alive and was extremely vicious. However, they also felt that Shun Miao's words were somewhat reasonable. As long as there was a survivor, a centipede would not die, and it would inevitably be traced back to the Jiangnan's Qin family. The matter of silencing is indeed not difficult. Chun Yushan smiled bitterly. But to go against the current emperor, as a brother, naturally he could not wait to hack Prince Yu into 1,000 pieces. They could also do this, but there were other people in the Chun family, women, children, old and weak. If the imperial family were to be implicated, one could not harm the entire Qin family. I have a way to let His Majesty not pursue this matter as long as you have the guts to raid Prince Yu's old nest. Shin Miao said. You? Chen Yuhai said, Shin young lady, we know that you are powerful, else the news that we have been searching for 3 years would not fall into your hands. But the imperial family matters are not that simple, and one would invite fire to oneself if one is not careful. Thinking that after I leave, you will also be able to find out my identity. I am the daughter of the formidable great general in the Ding capital's general residence. With this kind of status, do you think he has any say in the imperial court? The Qin brothers were stunned for a moment, and their faces were filled with astonishment. Most likely, they did not expect Shin Miao to have such an identity and then became silent again. They started their business in the Jianghu, and even though their family was wealthy, between the officials and merchants, the merchants were always below and could only watch from afar as they did not know the depth of it. With just a casual coaxing from Shun Miao, they were actually moved. Why do you want to help us? Chen Yuhai asked warily. What benefit does it bring you to help us with all your might? You are so strange. Just now, you were blaming me for not wanting to help, and now that I am helping, you are doubting me. You don't understand. Shin Miao's sarcastic words made Chen Yuhai somewhat annoyed. Chen Yushan waved his hands and looked at Shin Miao before smiling. Shin young lady is a sentimental person, but this matter is of great importance. If one were to implicate Shin young lady, not just to help you. Shin Miao said lightly, I also have a blood feud with Prince Yu residents. My Tangjia is now about to marry into Prince Yu residence and is also one of the people being tortured. If in the future you destroy the entire residence of Prince Yu, please spare my Tangjia's life. When the Qin brothers heard it, most of the doubts in their hearts dissipated and they cupped their hands towards Shin Miao. As such, many thanks. Both of you can go and inquire about the Chun family's younger sister's news. After inquiring, do not act rashly. 3 days later at this place, I will talk to you in detail. Chapter 207. The Chen brothers nodded their heads and could hear the meaning of Shun Miao's words to chase them away, so they did not hesitate and stood up. Chen Yushan said, after finding younger sister, Shin young lady has done our Chen family a favor, and in the future if there is any need for the Chen family, the Chen family will naturally not decline. Many thanks for the matter this time. Finishing, he carried his sword and left in a hurry, most likely to search for the whereabouts of the Chun family's younger sister. Ji Yushu stared at Shin Miao. He thought that Shin Miao's performance that day was sufficiently unique, but did not expect that today she was still so surprising. The people of the pugilistic world were all arrogant, and the Qin family was considered a large family. Moreover, this was originally a transaction of money and goods, but with just a few words from Shin Miao, she became the Chun family's benefactor. The Qin brothers' attitude towards Shin Miao was also very polite. Just like what the brothers said, in the future if Shin Miao had any difficulties, there would be the Chun family's help. It was not an easy matter to climb up to the Qin family. Manager Ji, now we can talk about the transaction between you and me. Shin Miao looked at him. I have already thought about the conditions of that day. Ji Yushu pretended to touch his chin and put on a difficult look. Actually, this information of yours is too dangerous. If it is done successfully, then naturally everyone will be happy, but if one day it is discovered, my Fengxian pawn shop will not be able to open anymore, and I, the shopkeeper, will also lose my head. As for all the servants, they will also lose their lives. So for this transaction, What you have to compensate is the Shun family and money, but what I have to compensate is a real life. Speaking of which, it is still my loss. Shun Miao glanced at him lightly and said, as such, the business cannot be done. I understand. Sorry for disturbing Manager Ji for so long. Farewell. Ji Yushu had not finished his planned words when he saw Shin Miao's face suddenly change and was about to leave. He was so scared that he did not want to pretend anymore and quickly said, Hey, I have not finished speaking. Why are the young ladies now so impatient? Shin young lady, even though I feel that this is very dangerous, but the first time I saw you, I felt that you and I are very fated. For a beautiful young lady like you, one think that there would be no reason for males to not agree to any request. I am a person who cannot bear to see a beauty wronged. If I do not do this business, one think that you will not be happy. In order to make you happy, I don't mind sacrificing my life. So, I'll do this business. In the secret chamber at the other end, after hearing Ji Yushu's mushy words, Gao Yang could not help but look at Xie Jingxing. Is he all right? He even dared to provoke such a vicious woman? This isn't Miss Peony. This is Miss Cannibal Flower. Xie Jingxing's lips twitched, reckless. After listening to Ji Yushu's words, Shin Miao said calmly under Ji Yushu's ardent and passionate eyes, since that is the case, then tell Manager Ji about my plan. Ji Yushu immediately sat upright. All right. Shin young lady, please speak. Now the people of Mingqi know that 10 years ago when His Majesty was attacked by an assassin, Prince Yu of the first rank sacrificed himself to save His Majesty from the assassin's hands and broke one of his legs. The assassin escaped. Not bad. Shin Miao smiled gently. The news that I want you to spread is very simple. That is that recently Prince Yu of the first rank executed a personal guard by his side. That personal guard coincidentally, other than being slightly older, he looked exactly the same as the assassin 10 years ago. This. Ji Yushu was stunned for a moment before suddenly pausing, and the teacup in his hands almost fell over. Manager Ji must definitely pass this news to the Emperor. Shin Miao smiled gently. Is this true? Ji Yushu asked tentatively. Real or fake? Manager Ji can think of ways to make it true. Shin Miao smiled. Chapter 208. Ji Yushu stared at Shin Miao and was unable to speak for a long time. He felt that this young lady who looked much younger than him was really a monster. The transaction is done, so I should leave. Shin Miao stood up. Manager Ji's actions must be faster. At least it must be done before the extermination of the entire prince of first-rank residents. After she finished speaking, she no longer looked at Ji Yushu and turned to leave. Hong Ling had been waiting outside for a long time, and seeing her come out, she knew that the deal was done and let her out again. In the secret chamber, Gao Yang was silent for a while before saying, I do not think that it is a good thing that the Shun family is so powerful. Now that there is more porridge than monks, I think that the Shin family cannot stay for long. It is up to me to decide whether to stay or not. Xie Jingxing lazily said, It is not bad to borrow the Shun family's hands to deal with that old dog Prince Yu. Perhaps one day the Shin family will deal with you like this. If they dare to, I do not mind to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. Xie Jingxing's beautiful black eyes lit up. There is still no whereabouts of the thing? Gao Yang shook his head. On the day of the extermination, I will personally make a trip. Xie Jingxing sat up straight and played with the jade cup in his hands. I do not believe that it can still fly. You really think that the entire Prince Yu residence can be exterminated? Shin Miao's plan is good, but when it comes to doing things, there will always be accidents. Accidents? Xie Jingxing chuckled, and his half-closed peach blossom eyes were as intoxicating as wine, but under the long eyelashes. His eyes were as sharp as a knife, like a cat catching a mouse. Ever since I met her, she has never had any accidents. Time always passed especially fast. The general residence was a very strange residence. Before anything happened, everything was naturally covered up, and everyone was happy and happy. From the relationship between the first few households, at least from the outside, it looked good. until a big fire burned down the Shun family's ancestral hall and burned away the trust that Shin Xian and wife had for the second and third household. The relationship of the first household was at least stiff. Now that Shun Qing had lost her innocence and was going to marry Prince Yu of first rank, any sensible person would know that this was not a good thing. However, Chen Roqiu and Shun Yu were still happily busy preparing for Shun Qing's marriage. Even though it was a marriage bestowed by the imperial family, it was not worthwhile to put on such a happy attitude for one's own family. If one looked at it this way, it would seem too cold. Ren Wanyin quarreled with Shun Ge because of Shin Qing, and old Shin Furen favored Shin Gui and was dissatisfied with her as a daughter-in-law, and did not say that she would return the power to manage the household to Ren Wanyin. Since Chen Roqiu was valued by old Furen, naturally, she became more attentive. Ren Wanyin was furious in her heart and could not help but show her resentment towards old Shin Furen. Old Shin Furen was even more ruthless and directly kept Shin Yuanbo and Rong Jingtang, not letting Ren Wanyin see him. At this point, Ren Wanyin had become a solitary person in the huge Shin residence. Even her former servants, some of them had secretly thrown their lot in with one Yin Yang, who was currently in the limelight. In Kai Yun Yuan, Ren Wanyin was either cursing loudly or hugging Shin Qing and crying bitterly, looking somewhat crazy. None of this had anything to do with the West Garden. Shin Xian and wife consciously kept a distance from the second and third household, and their attitude was neither hot nor cold. Through this matter, they most likely saw the second and third household's cold-hearted nature. At least from Shun Xian and Luo Shuiyan's point of view, if everything that happened to Shin Qing were to fall on Shin Miao, both of them would not swallow the insult and would fight for justice for Shin Miao even if they had to risk their lives. In addition, Shin Miao was much more sensible now, and her attitude towards them was not as distant as before, making them feel that it was worth it to ask Emperor Wen Hui for the grace of staying in the Ding capital. In the room, Bai Lu said, "Eldest young master just picked a few precious jewelry for young lady and also gave young lady a few banknotes. This servant has placed them in the box for young lady." Chapter 209. Shimiao nodded her head. Ever since Shun Xiu knew that she went to the Feng Xian pawn shop, he thought that she was short of money to spend and would pick some exquisite things from the palace to send over or directly send money over. He even said to her, "Younger sister, if you do not have money, then tell older brother, and older brother will give it to you. Do not go to any pawn shop. I am Shun Xiu's younger sister. Why would she need to go to a pawn shop to exchange for money?" Shin Miao was too lazy to explain to him, and adding on to the fact that money was not a hot thing, so she gladly accepted it. It had been 2 days since she met with the Qin brothers, and tomorrow she would make another trip to the Feng Xian pawn shop. She did not know if Qin Yushan and Qin Yuhai had inquired about the whereabouts of the younger sister of the Shin family. The life of the Shin sisters was undoubtedly very pitiful, and when she learned of this news, it was in the past lifetime. She married Fu Xiu-yi, and when Fu Xiu-yi just ascended the throne, he was very impatient with Prince Yu. Fu Xiu-yi was, after all, not Emperor Wen Hui, and Prince Yu did not save his life. As an emperor who had just ascended the throne, it was not something to be happy about to have a royal uncle who would only find trouble for himself. Jiangnanzhou province's Chun family finally learned of the Chun sisters' bitter experience 3 years later, and at that time, they also assassinated Prince Yu. These two brothers were rather hot-blooded and directly crippled Prince Yu's other leg, but it was a pity that Prince Yu was able to keep his life. Prince Yu was furious and wanted to trace who it was, so he threw this difficult problem to Fu Xiu-yi. To investigate clearly the assassin, it was extremely difficult, but Fu Xiu-yi's advisors were all over the world, and among them were people from the pugilistic world. Someone told Fu Xiu-yi about the Feng Xian pawn shop's private business. Fu Xiu-yi himself did not come forward and sent people to spend a lot of money to buy the news of the assassin who assassinated Prince Yu. It was strange to say that the Feng Xian pawn shop accepted this business, but it was not successful and said that they did not receive any news. The Feng Xian pawn shop did not receive it, but Fu Xiu-yi himself found it out. Thus the Jiangnan's Chen family indeed ushered in a disaster. In this lifetime, Shen Miao had long thought of this matter, and when Prince Yu had other thoughts about her and started the transaction with Ren Wanyun, she had already laid out such a trap. Everything was moving according to her chessboard. Shen Qing being humiliated, Ren Wanyun's counterattack, and even Shen Qing's accidental pregnancy were all in her plan. Naturally, at the returning banquet, pregnancy was involved, and Shen Qing wanted to marry Prince Yu, making Prince Yu furious. Prince Yu of the first rank would put all his energy on her. Thus the Chen family could take this opportunity to secretly plan. As for the royal family, it was even easier. In fact, Shen Miao always had a guess that with the Feng Xian pawnshop's ability, it was possible that in the past life they did not find out that it was the Chen family who assassinated Prince Yu, but Fu Xiuyi's people did not reply to any news. Perhaps it was deliberately done by the Feng Xian pawnshop. Could it be that the Feng Xian pawnshop had some discord with Prince Yu? So previously in the loft of the Immortal River, Shen Miao deliberately probed Ji Yushu and said the words exterminate the entire family. Ji Yushu's expression was stunned, but was not carefree. Obviously, there was no grudge between Ji Yushu and Prince Yu residents. However, the intuition of someone who had died once was terrifyingly accurate. Ji Yushu's reaction not only did not dispel Shen Miao's guesses, but also made her have another suspicion in her heart. If that was the case, everything could be explained. Perhaps the master behind the Feng Xian pawn shop was not Ji Yushu. Who was the person behind it? Shen Miao could not think of it. She thought that she was an empress in the past lifetime and had followed by Fu Xiuyi's side, so all these big and small secrets were all grasped in her hands. But now it seemed that the depth of the water was much more dangerous than she imagined. But no matter what, Prince Yu residence's doors must be exterminated and Prince Yu's life must be taken. As for Shen Qing, naturally she should live a life worse than death. In the past lifetime, Shen Qing had seen her in prison, so in this lifetime, she wanted to return the favor. Shuang Jiang carried the flower pot as she walked in and smiled. Yesterday the sun was very strong, so this servant took the flower pot out to bask in the sun. Young lady said that it would snow these few days, and this servant did not believe it, and wanted this servant to use an umbrella to cover it. Who knew that it would snow early in the morning today? Luckily, it was young lady's preparation. Otherwise, these few pots of flowers would be miserable, and this servant would have caused trouble. Speaking of which, young lady seems to like to make these preparations. Bai Lu smiled, to prepare things early and think of the possibility of something going wrong early. Every time when it comes to the critical moment, we would be able to pass it easily. Young lady's temperament is very steady and very good. Shen Miao smiled gently, and her bright eyes reflected the scenery outside, as firm as a rock. She said, "It is nothing. I just do not like accidents." Chapter 210. A day's plan always passed very quickly. On the third day, when Shen Miao came to the Feng Xian pawn shop, the Qin brothers had already waited for a long time. Compared to before, both of them seemed to have changed a lot. Especially Qin Yushan. That kind of forthright aura that was like a green mountain had disappeared and was replaced by a deep haze. Shen Miao swept a glance at Qin Yushan and Qin Yuhai and had an idea in her heart. Presumably, these two people had already inquired about the Chun family's younger sister's news. Perhaps they had even seen it with their own eyes. To personally witness one's own brothers falling into such a miserable situation, for the people of the pugilistic world who were decisive in killing, it would be a great stimulation. Otherwise, in the previous lifetime, the Chun family would not have gone to assassinate Prince Yu without a care for the consequences. Shun young lady. Qin Yuhai spoke first. Previously, Shun young lady said that the imperial family would not be able to trace the Qin family. Is it possible to tell us two brothers? Ji Yushu looked at his own teacup, as if he could see a flower in it, but he deliberately did not look at Shen Miao. Shen Miao sighed. Naturally, I also want to help, but like what was said before, in this way, the risk that I am taking is also great. From a certain point of view, the Shin family and your Qin family are tied on the same boat. If anything goes wrong, the Shin family will also suffer. Chen Yushan paused and said, I know that this trip is somewhat difficult, so if young lady is willing to help, half of my Chen family's business will be given to the Shen family. When the words were said, even Ji Yushu could not help but look up at Chen Yushan. The Chen family was the wealthiest in Jiangnan, and Jiangnan had been a fertile land since ancient times. The Chen family's money was more than the imperial family, so now that they took the initiative to give out half of their business to the Shen family, it was tantamount to adding wings to a tiger. When Shun Miao heard it, she could not help but be somewhat absent-minded as she looked at Chen Yushan's pleading face. The Chen family sisters were tortured, and in order to take revenge, the Chen family was actually willing to pay such a price. They clearly knew that even if she took action, she would not be able to sit back and relax. Even so, they were still willing to gamble. This could only show the position of the Chen sisters in the Chen family's heart. In her previous life, she was trapped in prison and was isolated and helpless in the inner palace. If the Shen family was still around at that time, would her father, mother, and elder brother also save her at all costs? Miss Shen? Chen Yushan reminded when he saw Shun Miao in a daze. Shen Miao recovered to her senses and smiled gently. Half of the family business is fine. I am helping you with this, but it is not because of your family business. It is nothing more than to form a good relationship. In the future, if there is a need for your Chen family, I hope that you will not decline. Secondly, I also have enmity with the residents of Prince Yu, and if the residence of Prince Yu is not destroyed, there will be a day when trouble will come. She looked at Chen Yushan. Now we are all on the same boat. Chen Yushan looked at Shen Miao, who was in front of him. Her eyes were clear, and her tone was sincere. It was as if every word that she said was powerful and could be done. From the first time they met until now, she did not behave like a budding girl. Chen Yushan couldn't help but think that if the Chen clan sisters had the temperament and ability of the young woman before him, they wouldn't be in such a miserable state now. Thinking of the Chen sisters, Chen Yushan's slightly better mood immediately turned gloomy again. He said, What is young Lady Shen's method? You do not need to ask about the imperial family side for the time being. It will be better after a period of time. In addition, if you want to take action, it is best to do it next month. Next month in the residence of Prince Yu. Prince Yu will marry my Tangjia, and on the second day of the marriage, everything will be lax. At that time, you can take action early in the morning, and it will be foolproof. Chen Yushan wanted to say something, but at the end he shook his head. How can you end the imperial family side within a month? Shen Miao looked at Ji Yushu, who was drinking tea with a smile that was not a smile. You do not need to worry about this. The most urgent matter is to gather men and horses. After a pause, she then continued to speak. Prince Yu residence is not small, and you must first understand the layout. On the day of taking action, other than my Tangjia, after saving the person, you must cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. Chapter 211. Don't worry, we brothers know, Chen Yuhai said. I don't know what is the rule of exterminating a family in the Jianghu. What I mean by exterminating the weeds by the roots means that women, children, young and old, servants and concubines are not to be spared. The entire Prince Yu residence will completely become a tomb. Chen Yushan and Chen Yuhai were both stunned. Chen Yuhai frowned. Even servants and concubines? Most of those concubines are pitiful people that Prince Yu captured. Shen Miao sneered. A centipede dies, but never falls down. If young Master Chen wants to be merciful, you will only harm the Chen family, and my Shen family will also be implicated. She spoke coldly. After a moment, Chen Yushan nodded. We won't leave anyone alive to drag you down. This is very good, Shen Miao said. Then wish both of you to take revenge and wash the residence in blood. After chatting with the Chen brothers for a while longer, the Chen brothers stood up and took their leave. After they left, Ji Yushu finally opened his mouth to speak. Shen young lady, you are so young but seem to know a lot of things. Just now I could see clearly that the Chen brothers are at least experienced and knowledgeable people and actually followed your arrangements. Shen young lady, it is the first time that I have met such an intelligent and beautiful female like you. One do not know if there will be a chance in the future to go for an outing with you in the suburbs in spring, admire the lake in summer, and enjoy the boat in late autumn. He was still saying it well at the beginning, but the more he said it, the more outrageous it became. He was like a lecher who took liberties with a good young lady. Manager Ji, Shin Miao asked, "Don't tell me you just wanted to tell me this?" "Cool." Ji Yushu cleared his throat. "In fact, I only want to tell Shin Young Lady that the news is already done and has been sent to the palace." One think that not long later, Shin Young Lady's desired result would be achieved. Shin Miao's heart was slightly shocked. Even though she knew that the Fengxian pawnshop had the ability, she did not know that the other party's actions were that fast. Presumably there would be people in the palace who would receive them, else to quietly infiltrate the palace. One feared that it would take a lot of effort. This Fengxian pawnshop's water was also very deep. She didn't hide her deal with the Chun brothers just now because she knew it was impossible to hide it. Many thanks to Manager Ji. Shin Miao's eyes drooped down. After the matter is completed, the promise with Manager Ji will be kept. Ji Yushu was silent for a moment before asking in a rare serious tone, "Shin Young Lady, this one has a matter that does not understand." "Go ahead." "Shin Young Lady is using the Shin family as the price to do business with me. Are you not afraid that there will be a day when I want the Shun family to do dangerous things and push the Shun family to the cusp of the wind and waves? This deal would not be worthwhile." After saying that, Ji Yushu stared at Shin Miao and paid attention to her expression. Shin Miao did not even blink as she lightly said, "Rather than worrying about future difficulties, it is better to worry about the present problems. If that day really comes, it can only be said to be the fate of my Shin family." Ji Yushu was somewhat puzzled. "Really? It's fake." In the secret room, Xie Jingxing listened to the movements coming from the side and said lazily, "Only Yushu, that fool, would believe her words." Gao Yang said, "This girl's deceiving skills are already at the point of perfection. How would Yushu be her opponent?" "No need to worry," Xie Jingxing said unhurriedly. "Once on my boat, it would not be that simple to get down." When Shun Miao got up to bid farewell to Ji Yushu suddenly said, "All right." "Shin Young Lady, previously you wanted me to inquire about that young lady Lu Ying. There seems to be news of her whereabouts. If Shun Young Lady is anxious, perhaps there would be a result in these few days." However, Shin Miao's reply made Ji Yushu stunned for a moment. Shin Miao said, "No rush. Manager Ji can slowly search. I will also slowly wait." Chapter 212. After she left, Ji Yushu then shook his head and said as he walked into the room, "Really a woman that is more unfathomable than young Lady Xiao Yao. At least young Lady Xiao Yao would be happy to gift pearls, but this one, could it be that she would be happier to gift heads?" He shuddered and quickly walked into the room. In the palace, in the Emperor's study, the memorials on the table were piled up high. Emperor Wenhui sat in front of the table and the memorials were spread out, but he did not even take a look at them. He was already in the prime of his life and was about to enter his 60s. Even though he was still hale and hearty, there were spots of white at his temples. The matters of the world were mostly just a reincarnation, and there were times when he was young and full of vigor. Even though he was now filled with lofty aspirations, the way everyone looked at him was that of a tiger that was gradually aging. There would always be a new tiger that would inherit his position. At this moment, Emperor Wenhui's expression was heavy. As he grew older, he became thinner and his skin was so loose that it seemed to stick to his bones, showing a strange old age. He spoke in a hoarse voice, and one could vaguely hear the monstrous anger in his voice. "Number 11 really killed an assassin that looked exactly the same?" The two black-clad men standing in front of him said, "Reporting to your majesty, yes. The person that was caught had been tortured. In addition, the trusted aide of His Highness Prince Wen that was caught in the residence of Prince Wen also personally admitted that Prince Wen had executed a masked guard a few days ago." Emperor Wenhui closed his eyes and suddenly raised his hand. The paperweight on the table flew out and broke into several pieces on the ground. After a moment, he then sneered, "Number 11, Jin had still underestimated him. There were many eyes and ears in the palace. the imperial concubines, officials, and even the Empress. These eyes and ears were all to survive in the palace, and whoever had more information would have the first chance to win. The Emperor was no exception. Only when his eyes were everywhere would the dragon throne be more stable. At the beginning, he accidentally heard from his eyes that Prince Yu had killed an assassin that looked exactly the same as the previous one. Emperor Wenhui did not believe it. The imperial family's feelings were cold, and he had stepped on the corpses of his brothers to sit on the emperor's throne. Leaving behind Prince Yu, who was ranked 11th, was because Emperor Wenhui always remembered that dangerous night when Prince Yu used his body to block the danger and was drenched in blood to save his life. Emperor Wenhui often thought that for so many years he treated Prince Yu well, not only because of the kindness of that leg, but it also represented that Emperor Wenhui still had kindness. Now that he was an emperor, everyone's feelings for him were no longer pure. Even his sons were scheming against him. But Prince Yu of the first rank was able to remind Emperor Wenhui that in this world, there was still a person who would disregard his own safety to block the sword for him. And he still had a personal disciple. But now it was like a huge joke. It seemed that the scene at that time was a play that was arranged by this personal foot, and even Emperor Wenhui suspected that the crippled leg of Prince Yu was fake. What did Prince Yu want to do? Plotting for the throne? Usurpation? There were so many records in the history books of concealing one's strength and biding one's time. And in one day, one's rebellion. Emperor Wenhui only felt anger and humiliation from being deceived. When one was betrayed by a trusted person, the trust would be withdrawn, and not only that, the suspicion would intensify. The people of the imperial family were naturally suspicious, and previously they did not suspect Prince Yu of the first rank because of his sincerity, but now that sincerity had become fake, the seeds of suspicion of the imperial family immediately grew into a towering tree that no one could shake. Send people to guard the residence of Prince Yu. Jin want to see what tricks he wants to play. Gao Gonggong lowered his head and looked at his eyes and nose as he silently looked at his toes, as if he did not hear the anger of the emperor. It was just that he sighed in his heart. Troubled times, you're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.